Hello, hello, and welcome back to Debate Dissection, back after a very hiatus of a couple of weeks. So
Short break.
welcome back, and a short break. Well, you had the con to organize and go to, and I don't know how you fit it in with everything that you do, but that's amazing, and I hope it went really well. I saw some of the little photos and the member stuff that you put forward. I saw some of the interviews with people.
There we go. Yeah. So I do during the convention itself. I tend to focus on videography, photos to the extent that I can, and whatnot. But there are a lot of shows where I could just like set the camera and go do something else, and I had this flash of inspiration to go do mini interviews, and I'm like,
yeah,
oh, this will be fun. So yeah.
Yeah.
And I didn't get as many as I'd like, but I got a few, and it was fun.
Yeah. And mostly it was sort of, why are you back at this con again this year? I'm sorry, it was what was it called? Nyacon or something?
NoCoCon. It's short for the North Country Comic Con.
Okay. My apologies. North Country Comic Con.
Yeah, we do it at like the very northern end of New York State.
Yeah. I mean, I've never really been to a Comic-Con or anything like that, of course. It's a bit too far for me, but yeah, I do like the interviews. I think, I think I was away because I had a debate. I thought it was on the Sunday, and then by the time I realized it was just too late. So my apologies for that. That's completely my fault. But, maybe having a break was good. Maybe it was good to have a bit of a break and come back to it, and sort of do the part 3, which isn't ideal. I must concede. But yeah, it's really good to be back. So what did you get up to last week on the Sunday instead of
the previous week?
Yeah.
I really can't remember that far back, weirdly enough. I think fair. I was just crazily preparing for NoCoCon, getting packed and ready, because I had to do the camera stuff plus all my personal stuff. Like I had 4 different outfits. We had the parade, we had the after party, and then cosplays for the 2 days. That was just stupid fun. I went as Halloween and Christmas. I just cosplayed the entire holiday, and I had candies for both. I had candy canes for Christmas, and I'd say Merry Christmas to people and give them the candy canes. But I had the Halloween candies were like eyeballs and spiders and ghosts and things on little hard candies, and I just hand those to people and be like, curses.
Curses.
It's the little things,
Yeah, awesome. And so getting back up to the debate between Matt Slick and Dan Barker, it was kind of interesting. I think that they weren't even talking on the same level kind of thing. Like it really was just, I mean, presuppositionalism is not great at the best of times. And Matt Slick, it's weird because this is, I know lots of people in the community who will say, yeah, I've seen Matt Slick. They're terrible kind of thing. They're absolutely horrible. But I've never seen him really before. I've never, and he's not good at all. And I don't know whether he's particularly bad because he is particularly bad, or whether this is unusual because he keeps complaining about his throat and, he's not having a good night. Is this a bad night for him? Have you seen other Matt Slick?
I feel like I have, but I checked back through our records and other videos, at least from my channel.
Right.
I can't find anything with it. I don't know. Maybe I saw somebody else review him at some point. I don't know, but I feel like I have seen him before, and he's just he interrupts himself because of the whole, excuse the coughing, I need some water, all that stuff. But his general arguments, they're kind of, this is what you get.
Okay. No, I mean, Dan Barker, he doesn't really have a lot to work with. I mean, what do you really have to work with when somebody sort of, well, I assume God exists. Okay. Anything more to that, or is that it?
That's
it.
Fantastic epistemology.
Well, something did occur to me, and I'd like to get your take on it, because presuppositions are not justified beliefs, right? They're never justified because they're presupposed. If you had some kind of what's called an epistemic or a sort of a knowledge or belief based justification, it wouldn't be a presupposition, right? You wouldn't have to presuppose it. So if someone is hang on a sec, let me organize my thoughts. If somebody, sorry, it's early in the morning for me, you know, like I'm not the best. Hang on a second, hang on.
Coffee time. Coffee helps everything, folks.
This is my favorite cup.
Ooh.
And it's Explosive Runes coffee. If you know what that's from, there was a cartoon thing called Order of the Stick, which was these Dungeons and Dragons stick figure cartoons. And this wizard always, like, he'd cast explosive runes on something, and then, like, he'd sit back and sip his coffee as something blew up, basically. And I loved it so much. I got the mug, which is a massive mug, and I love it. Anyway.
Hell yeah. So, I played a druid who used to do shit like that. Just leave traps on tent flaps and whatnot.
You know what? Like, I remember something you could do that was such a game of the system. You'd cast like you could set it up with a permanent explosive runes, and you'd drape it on your shield, and it didn't affect whatever it was that it was written on. So, like, when somebody attacked the fighter, and as long as they read the runes on the shield, it would blow up at, like, such a manipulation.
Don't read this.
Rules. Yeah, exactly. You know, and the thing was, I memorized explosive runes today. You know, like, just because D&D in that time, you didn't have spell slots you've memorized. It's a whole thing. The thing. Anyway, back to the thing. So presuppositions are not justified beliefs. So if somebody says, "Hey, I presuppose that God is the author of morality, or the giver of intelligibility, etc., etc., etc." The question is, how do they know that? Because what's knowledge? It's justified true belief, right? So if knowledge is justified true belief and presuppositions are never justified, they literally, by definition, they can't know it. And I thought, that's an interesting argument, because if you say, well, I presuppose this, you can't know that.
Yeah, it's kind of an obvious entailment when you put it that way, because it's like, I'm presupposing it because I don't know it, you know?
Right, yeah. Which I thought was interesting. This occurred to me, I think, a couple of nights ago. And I wondered if anybody's made that thing to a presupposition list before. You know, if your criteria for knowledge is justified true belief, which usually it is, JTB or JTB plus is another one in philosophy. I won't go into that; it's boring. But you know, then if you presuppose something, you're automatically saying, "Hey, but I don't know this, but I assume it to be the case." And I think that would be a good argument.
Yeah, because it puts them on the back foot, where it's like, can you do better? Can you say, you know, this thing, you're living your life based on this thing that you just said is not knowledge.
Yeah.
Can you support that in any way, you know?
Well, I've been looking a lot into what is knowledge and what isn't knowledge, you know, like, so if you know, especially with these sort of edge cases where you assume someone's a murderer because you don't like the color of their hat or something, you know, and they turn out
take it easy on hat.
Look, your color's amazing, but you know, I'm just saying, you know, or you don't like that they're bald, so you assume that they're a murderer. Okay, does that work better for you? I'm fine with that. Look, odds are, no, I'm joking. No, look.
I mean, I have seen you murder a lot of theists on live streams.
I make no apologies. I'm unrepentant for that one. Look, but like, if they turn out to be a murderer, but that had nothing to do with it, you know, if that's not justified, did you really know it, kind of thing? You know, stuff like that. Like, how do we actually know what we know? But it just seems like the knowledge that the theists have is based on the assumption they're correct already, and then they just try and fill in the blanks, like find a justification instead of like just anything will do. And presups, they sort of get to the point where, hey, I know it because I assume it. And they've sort of skipped all of that trying to find a justification and just gone straight to, well, I know it. I know it because I know it, because I know it, because I know it. It's that's not justified. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the few times I've bothered to take them on, I just say I can play that game too. Like, I know Nil, the great not god and creator of creator gods, created all the creator gods because it's in the fucking name, but also because I just declared it, you know?
Well, they've got an interesting stance to that. When you bring up something like that, they're usually like, yeah, but you don't believe that. And it's like, what? Like, does that matter?
Yeah, does believing it make it true? Like, are you a flat earther now because there are people who believe the earth is flat, therefore it's true? Like, well, what?
The idea is, well, if they say, hey, you need to actually believe something for it, that before humans existed, God must have existed. But if no one believed it, then it couldn't be true. Like, you get into such a wild ride of,
it's crazy statements.
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely. Well, speaking of crazy statements.
Oh, good.
Speaking of crazy statements. No, this is Dan Barker.
Transition. Yeah.
That's as smooth as my head, quite frankly. Look, I think that yeah, and don't forget to hit the like button if you are sitting down there with nothing to do, just listening in. If you're hit like if you like bald people and hats. And definitely hats.
Hats and bald people do go hand in hand sometimes.
I don't like hats. I've got a very strangely shaped head, so it's hard to find hats that fit me. Like, they seem to think heads are round and mine isn't round. It's very odd.
I have a similar problem. I mean, not only is my head like a couple inches bigger than the standard human head size, so that makes it difficult, but it's longer in the front than on the sides. I thought human skulls were like that, but apparently not, because every single fucking hat, I had to buy a hat stretcher to stretch the hat, forwards, backwards wise in order to make the, like, this hat I didn't have to, but most of my hats I've had to.
Oh, wow. Okay. I didn't know such a thing existed. I didn't know. Yeah, that's odd.
Pretty handy.
All right, so should we get into it? I think we're at 58, so I've already run it up. So I don't know where we're at. It's been a bit of a break, but I'm sure we'll get back into it.
5108.
5108, did you say?
That's what Past Me said when we adjourned last time.
I don't know if I trust Past You, Ember. They've been wrong before. There we go. Okay, and I think we're getting into open discussion now, which is fantastic. Like that's fantastic, because these sort of they had a rebuttal, didn't they? And Matt Slick didn't really talk about anything that Dan brought up, which is that's another sign of the presup that you'll do an introduction, put it out there, and they just ignore it completely. In fact, that's theists do that a lot. You'll have a rebuttal. They don't, it's kind of weird because, the rebuttal, you can do a lot of damage in a rebuttal. You can do a lot of, you can spill a lot of blood where arguments are concerned. I'm not talking about literally. Calm down, everybody. Okay?
Violence!
Just calm down, okay? I don't know why you would give that up, except you want to make more points. But I think that a rebuttal is probably, like, if I had a choice between an extended introduction in 2 sections and an introduction and a rebuttal, I would take the introduction and rebuttal, because it tears down those points rather than putting more out there. I think it is more effective. Which is why I have such a big problem with someone using, in a debate, using their introduction as a rebuttal. I think it's kind of cheap and corny, and it doesn't add any value to the debate. So, yeah, I don't know. I feel like he didn't even try to address anything.
Yeah, and there's a couple different strategic reasons. One being that you can, by doing a second introduction, you're introducing new points that your opponent cannot rebut because they've already done their rebuttal to your original points, which is one of the reasons it's frowned upon doing that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, but you can still kind of get to it in the, if you're having an open conversation, you can still get to it kind of thing. And I think that making your own points and refuting somebody else's is better than just putting a lot of points out there, some of which haven't been refuted. I think it's more impactful to sort of, come with answers against them, especially if you're sort of like, well, you brought this up and then I rebutted it with this. What's your answer to that? Like how do you justify this? Or, you point out, hey, not only did I rebut your point, but you haven't actually addressed this. Yeah.
Obviously, someone was praying for me.
Thank you, Matt. Dan, you have 10 minutes.
Thank you. Okay, now it's rebuttal time. Matt, you raised the Bible tonight. You brought it up. You brought up the God of the Bible tonight. You said that the Bible is the reason you know it's wrong to kill. I assume that if you believe that, we human beings are just too stupid to have figured that out on our own. We need some code to tell us. You said that you think that most humans would agree that it is wrong to torture innocent babies for pleasure, although your own Bible says that you should do that. Psalm 137:9, the Bible from which you quoted, said, "Blessed are they which take and dash the little ones against the stones." That word blessed means happy. It doesn't say
joyful.
Maybe during wartime.
Okay, so this is a bit of a contentious one, and I don't think it's a very strong point. And the reason is because Psalms especially is sort of ancient poetry or ancient verses or ancient scripture. They're not, it would be like, it's sort of written as a lament for lost Israel when they were basically enslaved by the Babylonians, right? So this is sort of by the river of Babylon. We lay down, we want to do this, we want to do that. And it more is just a people. But if even if you understand that, hey, it's poetry, why did God put it in his book or allow it to be put in his book is another question. I think that is valid, but I don't think it's that strong because it's basically saying, hey, we're going to tear this nation down and they're going to be wiped from the face of the earth. And we're going to, blot out all of their flags, and we're going to light fire to everything they ever loved kind of thing. You're not talking about doing that literally. It's more of a poetic, if you say, hey, we will destroy a nation and everything they ever loved, you're not actually talking literally about it, right? You're not going to actually go out and drown their puppies because they loved them.
They might.
I don't. Don't get me wrong. It is a valid point. It is a valid point that in your holy book it does say that. That is a valid point. I just don't think it's particularly strong because it is such a poetic verse. There's other things in there which are way better examples, right? Like you can beat your slave in this circumstance as long as he doesn't die very shortly afterwards. You are to suffer no punishment whatsoever, right? Mm-hmm. You can sell your daughter into slavery for money, things like that are way more egregious than this. If your son is drunken and unruly, you must take him out before the temple and stone him to death. Stuff like that is much more egregious than Psalms. But yeah, I mean, it is pretty screwed up. Mm-hmm. Well, those puppies were heretics, Andrew. They were heretics. Everybody knew it. Christy knew him. Yeah. Maybe the puppy and the goat were maybe they were pro-abortion. We don't know. Maybe
there might be some regrettable collateral damage, but the Bible says very clearly, that since the Babylonians were anti-God, you should be happy to take their babies and dash them against the stones. So according to your own moral code, you should enjoy torturing innocent babies for pleasure. We atheists and agnostics, I think most Christians, agree that the measure for morality is not some external transcendent code. The measure for morality is in the real world, and that is harm. Whatever causes unnecessary harm is what we would, by definition, say wrong.
Well, I think he's onto a good point, right? And I think it needs to be fleshed out that if God does everything that is good, right? Like, for instance, you should be happy that everybody died in the flood, and a Christian probably would be, because God was doing the right thing. That's the whole point of it. You look at any of these things that's claimed to be done in the Bible. Psalms, it's weaker because it's saying, hey, you know, we'd be happy if we did this. It doesn't actually say this is what happened. But there's instances of God commanded this, and that is a good thing. So that's why a lot of the examples used that are better are like the slaughter of the Amalekites or the Midianites or any of these tribes of Canaan that were commanded to be slaughtered by God. And if the Israelites didn't do a good enough job, God commanded them to reverse up and go over them again and get it right this time. Like this is what he's got to acknowledge is good. So, yeah, I think there's better examples. I do get his example. I think there's better ones you can use to say, hey, if the Midianites were slaughtering people or sacrificing babies or whatever, it was good thing that they were genocided. I don't see how that's not. And William Lane Craig, of course, would just wear that and say, yeah, it was good.
Yeah, I did. The babies get to be with Jesus now. Yay!
Yeah. Oh, okay. Justin's following you. I wish you'd follow me.
I just before the show, I was over at his place on Skeptic's Spin. He had Trevor and Neil and those BajaCon people, and they were talking about all the guests, and
cool.
It's a pretty good show.
That didn't come up in my live feed. I was over at Captive Desks because I didn't see that. YouTube, you've failed me again. You failed me again. YouTube. Yeah, sorry there, Justin. I would have been over there for the half an hour. I was up, but I was over at Dave's. But anyway, I'm sure it was great. I'm sure it was fantastic. That's why he's not following me, because I leave him hanging all the time.
That must be it.
He puts up with me, though. I mean, really, he's got to be a lovely Canadian because he puts up with Australians, like terrible Australians. But yeah, and welcome, a Christian. Welcome. We will be talking critically about your religion. I hope that's okay. But, as long as that's fine, talk respectfully, be nice, and people will be nice to you. And I will. That's a bald man guarantee right there. That's. I don't know why I'm so fixated on this.
Bald.
I don't know why I'm so fixated on this morning. I think it's just my brain's waking up, and it's the most identifying thing about me I can think of. Wow. All right. But yeah, I think there's better examples than Psalms. I avoid Psalms just because the whole thing. Have you heard the argument when you say, hey, this bad thing in the Bible, and they say, well, that's just metaphor kind of thing. Psalms is particularly susceptible to that because it is poetry and the lamentations of a people that have been oppressed, captured, sent to Babylon, never to see their homeland again. Like you imagine some, when someone's being poetic, it's it's sort of a lot of stuff comes out that could be metaphorical. So I go for the examples that, the opponent will actually say happened, like the slaughter of the Amalekites, Noah's flood, things that they actually believe happened.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever contributes toward lessening or minimizing harm in the world is what we would say by definition is good. There's no big cosmic evil with a capital E as if it were a thing out there. There's no big capital G for good, like there's some cosmic good that we're trying. It's relative to our species and relative to our needs and the things that we evolved to prefer. For example, water. Me giving a glass of water to Matt would be considered a good thing because water is good for his existence. If I gave him a bottle of arsenic, relative to our species and relative to our planet, that would not be a good thing to do. But it's not a cosmic thing, it's relative. We atheists, agnostic, secular humans have a very good natural basis to objectively justify our moral decisions. Not that we all think that moral principles are absolutes out there. It has to do with the real world and real harm. We do have an answer, Matt. Maybe one of your ears isn't quite working as well as the other, like you said to me before. But there is a good secular natural explanation for the existence of what we call moral values within the natural universe.
Yeah, and what's interesting is we sort of see a proto-morality heading towards there in the more intelligent animals, like some expectations of behavior from the animals around them. I wouldn't say it's morality, and I know that the lovely Bumblebee would completely disagree and thrash me in a debate about that.
And has.
But I think it would be a sort of proto-morality, just because it's not a code of conduct. It's more just expectations of behavior based upon certain criteria that the social animals have expected. And it is a social animal thing. You see less of it in things like cats than you do in dogs. Like there will be expectations in dog packs of certain behaviors. However, cats, not so much. They don't care. Cats are pretty solitary. So the more social an animal is, the more expectations of behavior is there. And I mean, I heard the other day, I don't know if this is true, but that when wolves travel long distance, they have the oldest wolves go first. So none of them lag behind. I thought that was beautiful. I hope it's true, because that sounds absolutely gorgeous, right?
I've heard something along those lines where they have like the sick and dying will get left behind. In fact, often they will instinctively wander off into the woods to go die so that the pack doesn't try to protect them. A lot of dogs still do this today when they have the option. But yeah, they'll have the oldest ones set the pace because they have the slowest pace, and then the strong young males tend to be at the back so they can see any threats that come in from the side and intercept them.
Okay. Yeah, so I heard that sort of, the stronger wolves will be at the back also. So if anything, like a predator obviously is coming up behind them, the stronger ones are protecting the more vulnerable members, and that's really cool. Like that's sort of shows the, what survival advantage does it have to protect the older, weaker members? It's not really a survival advantage, except when you're a social species and that level of bonding is there. It's very advantageous to have that level of care for your own members. So it's interesting. We see these sort of expectations of behavior. Meerkats are the other ones that are very, very like they have this expectation that each meerkat does a watch if they're not foraging or stuff like that. They each take a watch, they sit up straight and look around kind of thing. They keep an eye out for other predators. And if you're not watching or doing foraging, they kind of expect their members to contribute by taking care of the young and things like that. They're very social. It's very fascinating. Basically this is an Australian word. I'm going to throw an Australianism at a bludger. You have ever heard that one?
Is it like a ball that you hit people with?
No. It's a word
That's
that means
what my brain comes up with.
Well, it's somebody that's lazy and isn't doing work. So like if you're bludging, you're not actually, you're at a job just standing. Like construction worker, one guy works while the other guys just bludge. Like they just stand around doing nothing. And we have a word called a dole bludger. So the dole is your social security, and so bludger means that you're not working, you're idling basically. A dole bludger is basically an Australianism that means somebody that is claiming social security and not working kind of thing, like, or not even trying to work, right? Which I think is it's really I don't think there's a lot of people doing that. I think that most people that are getting social security are really trying to do work, and they're really trying. I think that laziness isn't a thing. Like they're just unmotivated. They have certain problems, I don't know anybody that's like, I just don't want to work, I don't know anybody that said that.
Yeah, it's pretty rare. I mean, I'm sure there's cultural differences between the U.S. and Australia, but you know, there's a whole big to do about the lazy people on welfare who just don't want to work. But when you actually talk to some of those people, you know, some of them are disabled and simply can't work. Or, you know, I mean, you can't live on the benefits. I don't know if it's different in Australia, but like it's not even enough to cover your food, let alone rent and utilities and whatever else you need, you know?
Well, it's enough to like cover your food, rent, and things like that. So it's enough to eke by, but your quality of life is very, very low over here if you are on the dole. It's you know, it's not impossible to live, but it's not a high quality of life. And you know, it's really weird because all it kind of does is encourage people to break the law and steal and do things like that in order to get by, because you know they're literally starving to death. You know, I don't know. I just, most people, like, they're depressed, they're unmotivated, they have problems. You know, I think that, you know, training goes a long way. Some of them just, you know, they've got no skills, but you know, I think there's a myriad of problems, but you know,
Oh, for sure.
I don't, you know, and I think that depression and you know, lack of motivation are a problem. I've collected the dole at a certain point in my life when I was sort of, you know, but you know, I mean, don't forget that I do have ADHD, I do have autism, and you know, it's been hard for me. I've had to learn some of the skills that I don't intuitively possess. So you know, life was a bit hard for me when I was younger. I've learned a trick or two, but yeah, that's a tangent in the chat, peeps. Tangents in the chat. Look, they're here for the tangent. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I did not say that human beings have free will. If you were listening carefully, I said no matter what you think about free will, and that's a good debate, certainly God, if he exists, would have it, whatever that is. That was my argument. So you were hitting a straw man there.
Actually, speaking of tangents, do you know Jake Pasick? He's a really, really cool guy.
Yeah, he's kind of Jefferson's brother, I think.
Jefferson Spatchcock's twin brother, in fact.
Okay, like, I thought I remembered that.
It's wild because, like, I kind of, like, I can sort of tell the difference. Their voices are so similar, and you know, if they're not using a camera, I can't tell them apart. It's really bad. But you know, if I really focus and the more I've got to know them, I'm like, oh, I think that is the. But their voices are so similar. So he was reviewing a debate of mine, and like it went for 2 minutes, and then he got off into the weeds because someone in chat was bringing. He's like, "Oh, sorry to tangent and stuff," and I'm like, "I cannot point fingers, my friend. I am the last person to point fingers about tangents. I mean, seriously,
that never happens.
Never happens. Never happens." But he's got a good point. Like, Dan's got a good point. Like, you know, this whole thing of free will. God's got to have free will. You know, even if we don't, God has to. But, you know, Matt Slick, I think he would believe in free will. Do you think he would? Is he a Calvinist? Usually Calvinists are the only ones that don't believe in free will as far as, you know, Christians are concerned.
There's a few other groups, but they're, the Calvinists are like the only main ones.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Christianity's divisions are weird.
That is true, yeah.
A little bit. But I think one of the biggest problems, and I think some of you can spot some of the fallacies in Matt's reasoning tonight. You might call it a category error, or you might call it the error of reification. Just because you have a word for something doesn't mean that's a thing. Just because you have a word like forgiveness. Oh, so there must be a big capital F forgiveness out there somewhere that we need to look for, right? Just because you have a word like logic or morality doesn't mean that those are things. Matt's trying to play this word game to turn words into transcendent things. Logic is a transcendent thing, when actually logic is not. Logic is, as he quoted from my book correctly, and I like to be quoted, logic is a part of a functioning of a brain. You probably know about the scientist Emily Nether. Have some of you heard about her? She was about...
Yeah, I've made this argument to presuppositionalists as well. Sort of their ideas of because something has a label that we put on it, it has to be one thing that's all encompassing of, anything to do with that. And life's a lot more complex than that. Like, we can't even put a label on Mark Reed and it's all Mark Reed. I mean, there's mitochondria with different DNA in it, and there's gut bacteria which has completely different DNA in it. Like, what makes up one thing is nebulous at best, which is why I'm a nominalist. I think that we put labels on associations of systems and then say that is that thing. But it's a lot more complex than that. And you can't just say, hey, God gives intelligibility. Well, what's intelligibility? Like, it's not this gift wrapped idea that is passed to you when you're born. Like, it's very, very strange the way they think.
Yeah, it's very surface level. Like, as you were pointing towards, most of the things we consider philosophical concepts are themselves emergent properties, and we can dig into what gives rise to those emergent properties. We can learn more about them and why they happen and so forth.
Right.
But from the presuppositional perspective, they're just brute facts. We can't look any deeper, even though we do and can, and some people make careers out of studying those things.
Well, I mean, the presuppositionalists, they presuppose that all of these things come from a God. And it's a wild place to start because, like, I've sort of said before that we're sort of doing the opposite of what they're doing. We sort of look around us and observe and then try to follow where the origins of things come from, because we're starting with our own minds, right? Where we find ourselves in this consciousness observing things and going, well, where does this come from? Why does this happen? How does this work? All of these questions that come up. The presuppositional apologist doesn't start there. It's wild. They start with where things come from, and then they work down to us, which is just, it's baffling how you can do that.
Yeah.
Like, it really is.
It's anti-science, I mean,
right.
What you were just describing, that's how science got started among humans, is we'd observe a phenomenon and be like, I wonder what causes that. And we'd work the problem and work the problem and work the problem for generations, if necessary, until we found an answer we could demonstrate was true. And they do the opposite thing. They're like, we're starting with an answer and we're going to try to bend reality to make it fit.
Make it work, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's weird because, it didn't really start with that, though. Like, a lot of the early scientists, not all of them, but a lot of the early ones, because of the really oppressive nature of the church that did not tolerate dissent from that church, they worked hand in hand with the aristocracy, who were supported by the church to, really enforce that religion on people. A lot of the scientists in Europe were people that believed in God and wanted to know more about how he did all of this stuff. The unexpected thing was that when they started looking at how God did it, they didn't find the God. That was the unexpected thing. And slowly over time, we realized, wait, all of these things that we're saying, hey, God must have done this or that or the other. When we look at how God did it, there's no God doing it. We have natural explanations for all of it. That was the unexpected thing. But yeah, like it would be like, well, instead of, looking at a crime scene and then finding where the murderer was, it would be like finding someone on the street and saying, well, they're the murderer. Let's find out who they killed. And then
shockingly, that's kind of how law enforcement works here in the US. Like, they find a dead body and they go, oh, that guy must have done it. Now prove he didn't. It's infuriating.
Really? That's wild. Okay, that's really, really wild. I mean, you do have suspects and things, but, I mean...
Yeah, occasionally we catch the right guy by accident, but I'm overstating the level of the problem, but it's a big fucking problem. Like,
well, but this is even worse.
So much money from wrongful convictions.
Yeah, but this is kind of even worse. Just like, I'd understand that would be a good analogy for an ordinary Christian and evidentialist, for instance, right? that would be a good analogy for an evidentialist that would say, hey, we've got a dead body here. It looks like my belief did it. Let's find the evidence to back it up, right? That would be an evidentialist. A presuppositionalist would just find somebody on the street and go, well, they murdered somebody. Let's find the murder, right? Let's just assume I'm going to suppose this person did this without even a body, without even anybody reporting anybody missing, and then let's find where they did it, basically.
Yeah. And we see stuff like that in not so. The witch trials are coming to mind, but that's not quite the same. It's people making
Salem
accusations and shit. Yeah.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
There was a bit of that when the Puritans were like all of culture. People would say something like what the reason the witch trials come to mind is because sometimes they would burn a person at the stake, and then it would be revealed that person was innocent. And the preacher, parson, judge, whoever who is in charge would often just shrug it off and say, well, they must have done something to deserve it.
Something, right. Because we wouldn't have burnt them. God wouldn't allow us to make that kind of egregious mistake. Yeah, that is nonsensical. Wow. Yeah, and that's why we don't allow spectral evidence, ladies and gentlemen. That's why we do not allow spectral evidence in courts, like visions and dreams and revelations.
100 years ago.
And the Holy Spirit would not be allowed to testify in court. I'll tell you that right now. There's a reason for that.
She mathematically and scientifically came up with was it the Nether conjecture, the Nether hypothesis, that actually the laws of nature are not really laws in the sense that nature is trying to obey, like a speed limit. As light is going through the universe, is it looking at the speed limit? Oh, can't go faster than that. They're not what you would call prescriptive laws. Prescriptive laws are what we would say human laws are. They are descriptive laws. They describe, and in fact, the Nether hypothesis basically showed that the laws of nature are really not the laws of nature. They are the laws of physicists. They are the laws that physicists must follow to understand nature. They are not really laws that nature is doing. Logic is the same way. Logic is not some thing out there. Bertrand Russell kind of said it like this when he was debating Father Copplestone in 1948. He says the category mistake that a lot of you theists are making is like, just because every human being in our species has a mother doesn't mean, therefore, that this human race has a mother. You're taking a finding from one logical sphere and jumping up to try to make it apply to another logical sphere. If I were to say that all the musicians...
Sorry?
It's the collection division fallacy. If properties apply to one level of an organization, they must apply to the next level up or the next level down, depending on which way you're going.
Composition division fallacy.
Yes.
Yes. Yep.
I'm bad at words.
No, you're right. No, that's cool. You're absolutely right. And I love this line of argumentation because I personally have used it before, and I've never seen anybody really use that argument. It's just something that probably I've seen somebody sort of say this kind of stuff, but I haven't seen it used in a debate, which is fantastic because I completely agree. I think that when we look at the laws of logic, so just as a sort of a slight tangent, it's still on subject. The laws of logic are the main three are the law of identity, the law of non-contradiction, and the law of excluded middle. They're basically three of these things that say, why is something, right? Like, why is it that Ember is Ember and the monitor is the monitor and the mouse is the mouse? It's basically really breaking down that all of the properties associated with that is what provides them their identity. And it's called Aristotelian logic because it goes all the way back to Aristotle, like, Plato's student. And so this Aristotelian logic has sort of set Western thinking under a certain way, but there's other schools of logic out there. There's Eastern logic, which is slightly different. There's quantum logic where you can throw the Aristotelian stuff right out the window. Like, it doesn't seem to work. So when they talk about these universal laws of logic, they don't seem that universal. What I think it is, and like Dan is saying here, is that we've made these laws to describe how things work, and they're imprecise. Like every model is imprecise, but some of them are really useful, which the laws of logic are. But they want to conflate between these laws and logic that we've made up, that we've done to describe the world, and the actual properties of the universe. So they may be not the most accurate. Maybe. We don't know. It's very, very hard to say.
Yeah, it's partly the reification fallacy, but also there's a little dose of equivocation in there, because they see the word law, and then because they've heard Ray Comfort and other apologists say it, they just instinctively pull out, well, then there must be a lawgiver. There can only be one lawgiver, though.
Just for quickly, the reification fallacy is sort of confusing a model of something with the thing itself. So basically, if you have a map and you can say, hey, there's a hill over there, and you're like, well, the map doesn't have it on, you're sort of doing a reification fallacy. You're saying, hey, this is, you're sort of confusing the map for the place, basically. So a map is always going to be an imprecise description of a location, because if we put every single detail on that map, it would just be the location, right? It would just it would be the size of the location. So it always is an imprecise way to describe things. But the question is the map useful? Yes, very incredibly useful. But is the map 100% accurate? No. So so look at the place, not the map. That's what we're saying.
In an orchestra are playing in harmony with each other. Does that mean, therefore, that every orchestra is playing in harmony with every other orchestra? You can see the category mistake. We all know that in Philosophy 101, that you can't do that. You can't jump from one level up to another and then make it apply. That's exactly what Matt has done with the cause. Our concept of cause and effect is something that we find within our natural universe by observation, and time is part of that. One of the reasons we know what causes what and what effect follows is because of time. If there's no time, you can't have cause and effect. So what Matt's trying to do, he's trying to take the findings within the universe of what we know about cause and effect and then apply it to the whole universe, as if that would be a meaningful statement to make about the cause of the universe, right? Well, now there's more and more and more scientists are coming around to the very high probability of the existence of a multiverse of some form. It's still a hypothesis, but we can indeed say that the universe, this universe we live in, probably.
Well, he's trying to address the fine-tuning argument, and I get.
Yeah, I get that. It's just, the way he slipped in a very high probability irks my astrophysics brain, because it's a totally unknown probability. It might be true, but we have nothing to base any probability calculation on,
Yeah. Yeah, I think that sort of going into, well, we don't have any kind of sample size for this, like, because the fine-tuning people, they throw out this, oh, the probability of this is so low kind of thing, and it's like, yeah, but we don't know the probability. We don't. That's the thing. Like, they say, hey, and physicists, I think they've done a disservice by throwing out, hey, the chances of all of these settings being at exactly the right level for the universe, it is so low probability. Well, yeah, but we don't really know the probability. Like, maybe a universe cannot form under any other conditions.
Right.
We don't know.
As Hawking pointed out, there's like 60 potential variables that are all linked to the force of gravity, how strong gravity is. And we can see from our astrophysics calculations that to have a universe like this, gravity has to be where it is. If it's slightly stronger, then your universe pops before it forms. If it's slightly weaker, then everything flies apart in that instant of inflation, and you don't even have fucking atoms. It just It doesn't mean it was tuned. It's an anthropic thing. If it were any other way, we wouldn't be here.
Right. That's the weak anthropic principle that we sort of see it as perfectly formed because it happens to be the place that we are. Like that, it's sort of like saying, oh, well, giraffes, they're perfectly designed for the environment. No, that's the weak anthropic principle. It's just that that's where they evolved from. That's where they, if they weren't, if they evolved somewhere else, then we'd say they're perfectly adapted to that. So that's the weak anthropic principle. And the whole idea was also, well, if there was a universe that popped before it got started, that is kind of a multiverse idea. Like, you have multiple instances. Like, it could have been quadrillions of universes before ours actually formed. We don't know. That's the whole point. I'm not saying that's the case. I'm saying we have no idea because our sample size for probability is exactly 1. We only see one universe. That is the only one we have any information on. So sort of saying, hey, the probability of this universe forming like this, nobody knows. Nobody knows. And that's assuming that the constants of the universe could be anything else, because we don't know the cause, except for the theists who say they do know the cause, because that's a thing they do. Which is sort of, and that's where the presuppositionalist would basically go, whoa, 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 whoa. No, you've got to demonstrate that God wasn't the cause. It's like, what? I wonder if he is going to do the burden of proof,
He might. It'd be interesting. It just... It always strikes me so funny because, something like that, as you often do, you can say, oh, well, prove it wasn't the Blarney Stone because it has all the same properties. It could be the thing you don't know. Right. Show me it wasn't. Show me it was your thing instead of any of the other equally plausible creator gods that have been posited and believed in by millions of people over thousands of years.
Yeah, well, that's the interesting part. They sort of want to establish the God first and then argue it's the Christian God, which is, it's kind of weird. It's kind of weird.
Probably is surrounded by something transcendent. Transcendent does not mean supernatural.
Correct.
A transcendent realm can be a natural realm. There can be a natural cause. When a snowflake forms, look at the beautiful pattern of the snowflake. Does someone think that somebody came along with their fingers and moved all those little molecules to create this work of art? Or can we explain them without reference to some personal transcendent? Can we explain them with reference to the natural universe? Now scientists, and Vic Stenger in his new book.
I personally think that transcendent can just be something that sort of sits between an abstract and concrete. Like, for instance, mathematics, for instance, is transcendent. It's sort of, it applies to the physical world, but it is a product of, our constructions. So, I think, I think that there's an argument to be made that transcendent things can just be bridging the mind and reality.
Yeah, I mean, that's all it means, is that it crosses categories. You can have something that applies to the individual and to a civilization.
Right.
In that respect, it's transcendent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think transcendent means what theists think it means, like that it has to be supernatural. No, transcendent things don't have to be supernatural. You can transcend all number of categories.
God in the Multiverse points out that the multiverse arises naturally from the mathematics of chaotic inflation in the early part of the universe, which is not a cause in the same sense that we would talk about cause and effect in our natural universe. So he's creating a category mistake and a reification mistake, but also a logical mistake, talking about how if there were an infinite series of preceding effects before this one, we never could have arrived at now, but we have arrived at now. Therefore, there could not have been, there had to be a first cause, right? Because otherwise we couldn't traverse in infinity. Well, that logic also applies to God. If there is a God,
correct,
God has a functioning mind, and that mind has what you would call antecedent causes to it. For example, before God created the universe, he had to decide to create the universe, right? The deciding didn't happen after the creating. Did God wake up one day and say, oh, look, oh, I created a universe. Well, now I'm going to decide to do that. Obviously, in the mind of a God, whether he's in time or out of time, whatever the heck that could possibly mean, let's just assume that means something. this God has to be in his own mind a series of preceding antecedent decisions and wants and thoughts. And according to your own logic, if an actual infinity cannot exist in reality, because we never would have traversed it, then God himself must have had a first thought. And that shows how your argument is turning around and inviting itself in the posterior. So
yeah, and I agree. It's worded a little clumsily by Dan. I get, like, in the middle of a debate, don't forget, we have the luxury of sitting here and discussing it at leisure and stuff. He comes up with this stuff on the fly, which is just fantastic, you know. Like, this shows just how good he is. But he's got a point that if you say that, you know, how does Genesis begin? Like,
the Spirit was hovering over the waters.
Right. So at a certain point, God existed, but the universe did not, or everything else did not. It was just God, right? According to Genesis. And then he created something, all right? Or, you know, then there was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, kind of thing, right? So at a certain point, there was the God with nothing else, right? And if God is eternal, you somehow have to get to the God existing to the rest of the universe existing. But if God has existed eternally, you never come to the point where the universe exists, because there will be an infinite amount of time before God creates the universe, right? Because if God exists for without the universe, then that has to be an eternal state. It cannot change ever, because you have to pass an infinite amount of time before he creates the universe. So this is basically, you know, this is what we call a reversal kind of thing. You know, like, he takes his argument and says, yeah, that applies to God as well. Correct. Mm-hmm. If you want to say, hey, you know, if something exists eternally before it comes into, you know, something comes into being, like the universe was in an eternal state, that can't be, because an eternal amount of time has to have passed. That applies to God too.
Yeah, it's Zeno's paradox, and which wherever you want to put your first cause, it applies to that as well. I like to take a more physicsy direction with it, because, you know, in physics, time and space are interchangeable. And you say, okay, well, here's a problem with this if infinity then never argument.
Yes.
Take space, right? We've got this vast universe that, as far as we can tell, space is infinite. There is no physical edge of the universe. There's a temporal edge. We're in the present, we're on the leading edge, but there's no physical edge. Space just keeps going and going and going. If space is infinite, how can you ever get to Chicago? Because you have a starting point. You're not starting at the beginning, because there is no beginning. So for this first cause, because infinite yada yada, were to make any sense, even in a temporal realm, you still need a finite beginning point, whether it's God or the universe or whatever, where you start measuring from. And so you're never actually dealing with an infinity. You're only dealing with the beginning point to creation or whatever.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just typing something in chat.
How dare you engage with the chat?
Yeah. How dare I do engagement? No, it's okay. It's a good question. I'll bring it up. So God brought time and existence at the point he first created. Yeah, that's correct. But if God existed eternally before he created, right, which has to be the case, because when you're talking about creating something, when you're talking about, you know, I made this coffee mug. I didn't. I bought it online. But just say I made it, right? When you say, hey, I made this coffee cup, you're explicitly saying, hey, there was a point that this did not exist, and then I brought it about. I made the clay or whatever, and I don't know how to make coffee cups. I made the ceramic or whatever, and then made it, right? So you know, that implicitly said there was a time there was only God, and then a time where there was God and heavens and earth. That is how creation works. So there must have been an eternal time, using Matt Slick's argument, because he's assuming sort of a what's called a tense time, like a linear progression. I don't subscribe to that one, but using Matt Slitt's argument, you'd have to say, well, God had to exist eternally before he actually created the universe. And so his own argument works against him.
Either stick to your premise and apply it to your God itself or himself or herself or whatever it is, or get rid of the premise. The premise is a bad premise. You cannot ask, I know this sounds funny, but you cannot ask, like Matt asked, is logic logical? That is an incoherent question. It sounds good, doesn't it? It's like kind of like what Daniel Dennett would say is a deepity. Deepities are phrases that you can speak, like love is a 4-letter word. Wow, yeah. And we think it really means something. So, but when you scratch beneath it, what is actually happening? What is north of the North Pole? You know, I mean, things like that you can put into a sentence, but you cannot ask, is logic logical? It's like asking, is harmony harmonious? Or how do you digestion? See, it's jumping up a logical sphere. Logic is not something that we find has to be logical. Well, logic has to be useful. There are not these things out there called the law of excluded middle that exist independent of minds.
I've made this exact argument and I've never seen this before. Like, I've made this argument that they think of these laws of logic as these things that are out there rather than just our description of how reality operates. Like, I don't, it's so baffling, but it's really good to see somebody else, you know, I mean, Dan Barker is amazing, you know, and by that acknowledgement, I must be amazing as well because I've used the same arguments. Thank you. I rest my case. Thank you. Thank you. But I love his arguments. Yeah, I really do. He's really nailed it. That he's speaking of these concepts that describe the world, like logic and you know, like harmony and things like that. These labels that we put on things, and saying, hey, that is a object in the universe itself that has been given to us. No, they're just our descriptions that have all of this communication and this baggage with it that describes properties of the world we see around us. That's all. That's all. Like when we use the word environment, it's not a separate thing, right? It's not this extra thing that lays on top of the landscape and that's the environment. It includes all of it, and it's just a description. And it comes with baggage, right? It comes with a lot of things that we assign to that description. So when I say to Ember, hey, you know, I care about the environment, there's a lot of stuff that comes with that. But it doesn't mean that the environment is its own thing. It's an amalgamation. Look. I could do worse, Ember. I could do worse. It's true. Frankly. And I just want to say justice for Asherah. If you don't know who Asherah is, I really highly recommend reading up on Asherah, because that is the consort of El, who became El Yahweh, who sort of became El Yahweh Asherah, like subsumed into this one deity. So
it's trippy, but that's also the Asherah story is so great for so many reasons, because it shows another deity that Yahweh was afraid of, and it shows there were other deities. Like Yahweh made a point of telling the conquest people to destroy her shrines. Like he was that afraid of her, and she was that real and powerful at the time. But also it goes to show the evolution of the scripture itself, because before the 1950s, that was described very differently in the Bible. It was only after the discovery of the Nag Hammadi scrolls, I believe. Dr. Kip would know better than I, but we found older versions where it spelled out that the shrines were specifically to Asherah, and the modern Bibles were updated to reflect that.
Yep. They were subsumed. The deities were subsumed into this one figure. Really interesting and you know, historical. I was actually watching a stream on Apostate Sisters where they were talking about it with Ryan. That really great stream. Ryan Coltastic. You know, she's on the Damn Network. Really highly recommend. Really knowledgeable.
Emily Nether said with her conjecture, these laws of logic are really laws in the descriptive sense of how a properly functioning mind uses when it is observing the universe. So Matt is trying to pull a rabbit out of a hat. He's trying to create these immaterial transcendent realities out there and saying, see, look, these things exist, therefore that's consistent with the existence of my God. That's just bad reasoning and bad logic. So we know the logic is bad because we test it with observation.
Sorry?
Because if man is a god, then he can create these abstruse concepts floating out in the cosmos. He can just bloop because he's a god. It's sort of a play on that idea where theists are always saying, oh, you're only an atheist because you want to be your own god. But here's a theist who, in effect, is trying to be his own god. I just find it funny.
You don't test logic with logic. You test logic by observation. You look at your premises. You see if your premise is good. You can have a perfectly logical conclusion that is wrong. Logic doesn't always give you truth. Logic can give you untruth if your premise is bad. So these are just...
Yeah, he's talking about the difference between like just soundness versus validity. A lot of theists, and especially presuppositionalists, will sort of go, okay, well, I've got this syllogism. It's logically valid. It logically works. And I've had an entire debate with somebody that was just, well, it logically works, so it must be true. That is not the case, right? So you have two things. You have validity and you have soundness. So validity is whether it logically works. So I could say, hey, I spend a lot of time in the kitchen in the morning. It's the morning, so I'm probably in the kitchen. That's logically valid, right? That is a valid syllogism. It doesn't mean that the conclusion is true. It just means that it's possible. It's logically possible. And just because something's logically possible doesn't mean it's true. Soundness is how actual true the premises is, how it actually, has to be true. So I could say, hey, Mark is a cat. Cats, cats urinate on furniture. Therefore, Mark urinates on furniture, right? That's logically valid, okay? That is a logically valid syllogism, but the soundness, because I'm not a cat, it's not sound. And that's the difference. And also it's the difference between formal and informal fallacies. So formal fallacies are the ones that violate that validity, the logic, violate the logic, basically. And you have all these formal fallacies that violate logic. Informal ones are the ones where you're saying, hey, what you're saying isn't sound. Like the saying Mark is a cat kind of thing. That's basically a conflation or an error, basically.
Descriptive, what we call laws of how human mind and how human reasoning works. So there's more to say about your opening statement, but basically I think what I have said is enough of a rebuttal to show there's a lot of fallacies in your thinking, just like there was in the mind of John Calvin.
Oh, was that a dig? Was that a dig? He seems to have taken a shot at John Calvin. He said, you've made a lot of fallacies, as did John Calvin. So Calvinists, basically, that's their guy. Calvinist is based upon the arguments of John Calvin.
Damn it, John.
Damn it, John. Yeah, so I think he just took a dig at his hero. Good morning, Journey. Oh yeah, he knows it too. Yeah, okay, all right. Well, show he's wrong. Show he's wrong.
We'll take a break for a few minutes, and then when we come back, we will be answering some of the questions that you, the audience, have provided for our speakers.
Oh, audience questions? What, there's no open? Okay, I completely missed the
questions that you have provided are...
We'll go through the questions because we're only like an hour in. So yeah, Calvin and Hobbes. Yeah, you're right. You're right. He's hassling Calvin out of Calvin and Hobbes. Yes. Yes. He's hassling a child. He said that the child is using a lot of fallacies. Well, I mean, he is kind of deluded into thinking. I mean, it's not really deluded. He kind of thinks that his toy is alive and talking to him. So, I've always wondered about that one because, like, Calvin seems to really believe that tiger is alive and well. And at what age do you go, look, you can't still pretend? Like, if he's 18 and still carrying around this, you'd start to worry, wouldn't you?
Hey, I still have my first teddy bear. Now, granted, it's not a tiger, but
but like, you don't talk to it and expect it to look. I'm just saying.
I think they did one. I don't know if it was the actual artist or like fan art or something, but like they did something like way in the future, and like he was looking, and it's just a stuffed tiger, and he was like, "I miss you, buddy," and then he turns around and like the ghost of actual Hobbes is like, "I miss you too, and I'm still here," But he's like
that's
transparent,
Oh
yeah.
no! Oh, that's depressing. Why am I ruining Calvin and Hobbes?
Yeah,
Why do I do this?
It's a whole metaphor for growing up thing.
Yeah. This is why we can't have.
Why are you like this?
Why are you like this? No, it's at some point you got to grow up and say goodbye to your imaginary friends, like Hobbes and Jesus. Just saying.
Ask to the appropriate person.
They will have 2 minutes to wild.
What's that?
Humans with their things, like,
oh yeah,
when you start out, you've got Jesus, you've got the Easter Bunny, you've got Santa Claus, you've got the Tooth Fairy, and the order you give those up in depends on your life experience. But
sure,
you lose the Easter Bunny, you lose the Tooth Fairy, you lose Santa, but Jesus, he's the real one, though. The fuck? I mean, Santa brought me actual presents. I could see presents. I had physical evidence that indicated the existence of a Santa. Jesus didn't bring me shit. So what the fuck?
Well, I think the stakes are a lot higher. I mean, if you basically go, well, Santa isn't real, you're basically giving up this idea of that Santa's going to come and bring you presents. It's not a big stake because you understand the presents were coming. They just never came from Santa. When you give up Jesus, there's a whole load of stuff that you're giving up. Like, oh, I get to go to heaven eternally and all of this kind of stuff. Like this, they really do drill in this huge expectation. And it's sort of logically, it's the argument appeal to consequences. Like, well, if you don't believe in Jesus, you won't go to heaven, kind of thing. And you have to question whether that's real, because you might say, well, if I give up Jesus, I won't go to heaven. But if he's not real, you won't go to heaven anyway. Like, whether or not you go to heaven isn't really a product of whether you believe in a Jesus. It's whether the heaven is there to go to. And there's no reason to think that. That's no. I'm not a mythicist. Like, so I think that Jesus, well, I accept the scholarly consensus that Jesus was probably a real person or persons, but I'm talking about the concept of a magical man that's going to come back and save everybody. It really is sort of, wishful thinking.
Yeah, there's a difference between.
Oh, are you frozen? Have you paused momentarily? You look like you're back.
I may have been. I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought the internet locked up for a second there. But yeah, there's a difference between
about Jesus.
Yes, I have been smited.
No, I was the one hassling him, so I don't know why he attacked you. And
I was there. I don't know. But there's the possibility, maybe even probability, of a historical Jesus, and then there's the idea of a magical carpenter ghost who wants to live inside you. It's different things.
Yeah, it's no reason to believe that is true. And considering that the book talks about the days of him coming back are imminent, and then 2,000 years later, 2,000 years later, we're still waiting for this imminent return.
That just proves that heaven exists outside of time, because Jesus lost track of time, because there's no time there, you see.
Okay. Okay. You'd think he'd be able to afford a watch or a calendar, or you know.
I mean, the calendar's based on him. You'd think he'd get free copies, but no.
No. Wow.
Respond to that question, and then the other person will have the opportunity to
Up on the web.
Yeah, we know how questions and
some of the
answers
questions
work.
that
Thank you.
the audience have provided for our speakers. The questions that you have provided are going to be asked to the appropriate person. They will have 2 minutes to respond to that question, and then
I just hold it.
Anthropic principle and go through some of the stuff. It does get. You may.
Sorry,
example.
this is my fault. My fault.
Do a 1 minute response to that answer.
I should have just let it run. Hey, like I've screwed around that much.
Question from the audience. Assuming
Jester for $2 said Jesus has ADHD. Yeah, probably.
He got distracted.
I know he didn't write his own gospel, so maybe he did. And hey, I feel for him. It's hard to get things done if you do have ADHD. I should know. So yeah, no, I feel for him, because maybe that's why he never wrote his own gospel. He kept starting and just, you know, noped out from ADHD. That makes a lot of sense to me, Jester. I like that. I like that.
that the Christian God created the universe with humans in mind, why are we such a minor part of it?
Why are we such a what?
Such a minor part of
The
it.
universe?
Yes.
Look up on the web the anthropic principle, and you will find out that basically the universe has to be designed the way it is for life to exist here on Earth. For example.
No. So this was a common argument a long while ago when we thought that the Goldilocks zone was a lot narrower. We're actually towards the outer edge of it. We could actually be better placed in the Goldilocks zone for humans to live. You know, it gets a little cold upon occasion. So,
well, I mean, there's a couple different factors. You know, I've gone on rants about this Goldilocks zone thing, and it only applies to a planet exactly like Earth, with an Earth-like mass and density and an Earth-like atmosphere and a moon-like moon in the right proportions and so on and so forth. If you have different properties of your planet, then you have a different habitable zone. The key of it is to have liquid water available on the surface, so life like ours could exist. Now, you can do life in different ways. You don't necessarily need liquid water, but to have us, you need liquid water. But you can get liquid water 2 different ways: temperature and pressure. So you can go a lot cooler if you have higher pressure, or vice versa.
Yeah. And I must say, like, there is so much of the planet that is completely inhospitable to humans, especially without technology, right? Without technology, like even basic technology like fires and furs, we're confined to a narrow band of this planet that we'll actually survive on. You know, come winter, we'll freeze to death if we don't have some form of technology working for us. So it's not that well designed for humans at all. If you actually, you know, start to think about it, there's the oceans we can't go. There's like sort of more elevated places with you know, smaller amount of oxygen. And if this was designed for us, it would be, you know, a sort of nominal temperature all around the planet that we could survive in. But it's not. We have to actually come up with technology in order to survive. And still people do freeze to death. You know, it's not that, it doesn't seem like it's designed for us. It seems we're adapted to it. That's what it seems like to me.
Right now, I'm in an artificial cave with heating devices within close proximity. Like, we need our technological support in order to spread beyond, you know, African savannas and things that we were designed for.
Yeah. Ah, dear. Yeah, but that's the weak anthropic principle. So he's talking about the anthropic principle, sort of taking it as this place looks designed to suit us. And the weak anthropic principle is actually the true one, which is it looks designed for us because we're adapted to it. But that's not the case.
The gravitational force, if you were to take one side of our galaxy to the other side of our galaxy and divide it up into inches, the universal force constant, the gravitational force constant, is right at one location. If it's 1 inch either way, life can't exist on this planet. There
life
seems
as
to
we know it.
The life as we know, like we would, like if gravity was higher, we wouldn't be able to survive because it would be too much pressure on the way that we walk. But that doesn't mean life wouldn't exist, and we know this because there are, you know, bacteria that can survive in space and then defrost when they need to and go about living. There's bacteria, like, so life as we know it wouldn't exist, but life would exist. Life is a lot more resilient than Matt Slick thinks.
Yeah,
It's just
we still haven't cracked abiogenesis, of course, but the research into it has taught us a whole lot of things about the resiliency of life. It seems like life is an inevitable consequence when you have conditions that permit life. Like Venus, maybe, but probably not. Mars, it seems very unlikely, but maybe Europa, maybe Iapetus or Enceladus, or Titan's a great candidate because I mean, for fuck's sake, it has a thick blue atmosphere, you know, that often is the result of biological action, but no, it's not the only way to get that. So we don't know for sure, but it could be.
Could be. Like, we're not saying that, hey, if these constants were changed, we wouldn't, that life wouldn't exist. We're saying that we wouldn't exist. And it may be life as something we wouldn't even recognize that is suited for that environment. And this is where you people that don't understand evolution really fall down. They're sort of, well, nothing would exist if these were changed. No, something would. And we have no idea what that would look like, and it would be unrecognizable to us.
Yeah, that's a big theistic conflation. It's not just theists, but when theists go down this line of reasoning, oh boy, it shows that they think life existing at all means humans existing. Without humans, it's not life, because nothing else that's alive matters, because it's all there just to support human life. The trees are there to make oxygen so the humans can breathe. You know, it's very dominionist.
Yeah, and it's sort of what he's saying doesn't answer the question either. So the question was, well, if this universe was made for humans, why are we such a small part of it? Which we are. Like, if we're looking at the scope of the universe, like, to say we are minuscule in the universe is, it doesn't even begin to attempt. Like, the closest star to us is what, 4.2 light years away? It is almost beyond our comprehension to hold in our minds.
Centauri is 4.3.
4.3. You know, that is, you know, and the universe itself, like, we're just one of millions of stars in the Milky Way, and that's just one galaxy. Like, it's vast does not even describe it. It doesn't even begin to describe it. So the question was, why are we so small in this universe? And Matt Slick's like, oh, well, if this was, we wouldn't be here if these things were changed. It's like, that doesn't answer the question. If the universe was in fact created for us, then why this massive area? And it kind of, one of the things that I've sort of said before was, have you ever met a theist that tries to use simulation theory and says, oh, well, if we're in a simulation, then God is the creator of the simulation, kind of thing? You ever run into somebody like that? The size of the universe kind of says, well, that isn't really a possibility, because who would run a simulation with like one tiny bit being the simulation and then runs all this other stuff for no reason whatsoever, like just zero reason. Exactly. It sort of is this thing of, well, why is God causing all of these, you know, like, because don't forget, in Matt Slick's world, there's no other aliens, no other anything else out there to provide for. It's just us, right? That is the only thing that exists, because that is what the Bible describes. That's Matt Slick's position. why all of these galaxies colliding and, stars going supernova, all of this fireworks out there in the universe for no reason whatsoever. And in fact, some of them are beyond the visible eye, so they're not even so we can look at them. They're just happening out there. Why?
To the mysterious ways, or
Mysterious
something.
ways, yeah.
It's trippy as hell. Like if
the one of the God
amazing.
wants you to know how magnificent He is. Is that impressive? I don't like. It's cool and it's interesting, but like it doesn't point to a God, and God would know that. I don't. What?
You would think anyway. I don't know. This whole made in God's image thing always throws me, because I'm like, God is a small hairless monkey who's insignificant in the grand scheme of things. Like, it takes 8 billion of us to cause climate change, like,
yeah.
Why aren't we like giant space dragons that can eat entire planets,
And humans are weird. Okay, humans are really weird. Even where animals are concerned, humans are weird. Like,
True.
I was learning some stuff the other day about how weird humans are, and like apparently, capsids, right? Like hot chili peppers and stuff. They produce a chemical in order to stop animals from eating them, and we just eat them anyway. And coffee is poisonous. The plant produces it to stop animals from eating it, and we brew it up and drink it. We're so strange. And other animals, if they ever met a human, they probably would think we have mange, because we have so little hair on our bodies. It's weird. It's so weird. Humans are odd beings, which sort of, if we're made in the image of God, then God's very weird as well. I don't know why, but it's very strange.
Yeah,
to be an issue of design.
That's also where a lot of the conspiracy theories get their material. They're like, well, humans are so different from every other animal in these various ways. Like Alex pointed out, many other mammals have a season, or they'll go into heat periodically or whatever. And humans are like always in heat effectively, and we have a breeding season 13 times a year or whatever.
Yeah.
And so they said, clearly we were engineered by aliens for some reason,
Are bonobos like that as well? Aren't bonobos always, sort of obsessed with sex even more than humans?
Bonobos are very friendly in that specific sort of way. Yes.
Yes. Very, very, very loving animals. But apparently, no, bonobo females are not always in heat. They have a long period of sexual receptivity compared to other primates. Yeah, that's really weird. It's kind of this weird thing. Well, yeah, I know that, Rembrandt, but like a lot of animals will avoid other animals. Like dogs will avoid dogs that have like hair falling out, because that dog's sick. They at least know that. It's just something that sort of happens. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not expecting them to diagnose us, sir. What was I saying? Oh yeah, other animals are strange as well. Like if you want a strange, look at the koala. It's weird, right? They're the only animal to eat eucalyptus leaves. It's poisonous to most creatures. It has to sleep for like 22 hours a day just to be able to digest them. And its brain has shrunk to the point where it doesn't recognize leaves unless they're attached to a stick. Like unless they're on a branch, they don't recognize it as food. So they can't. Yeah, it's sort of, so the amount of energy required to digest these highly poisonous eucalyptus plants, their brain power has shrunk. Koalas, and don't even get me started on how they pass along the bacteria for those that gut biome that can digest them. It's wild. But yeah, there's some weird animals out there, sure. But humans are part of those weird animals. We've got some very weird behavior.
I mean, I imagine every species has its idiosyncrasies because it's the nature of evolution. It's always throwing out oddball stuff, and then whatever helps you survive sticks around.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you may think, oh, it can't be that big, what a waste. That's a subjective opinion. When you start looking up the facts, you start finding out, wait a minute, something's up. Look up the anthropic principle and go through some of the stuff. It does get interesting. And I've seen atheists try and address it because they know it's an issue. I was at a debate in Minnesota. I was there.
Well, why don't you present the argument rather than saying, hey, go look up the argument? And I debated somebody and made a case for it. Make a case for it now. Instead of regaling us with a story about how you are victorious, just present the opposition article than saying, oh, atheists think it's a waste, but it's not really because
he may be doing that because he's only got 2 minutes to answer, but repeatedly saying, Google it. Yeah. It's not a great way to do it. So Encyclopedia Britannica says the anthropic principle in cosmology is any consideration of the structure of the universe, the values of the constants of nature, or the laws of nature that has bearing upon the existence of life. Which is to say, because we can observe the universe must be made for us to observe it.
Right. It must be conducive to life observing it if we're there to observe it. I don't see how this supports his argument.
No, it doesn't really connect to much of anything.
No, because the whole point isn't that, hey, our tiny corner of the universe or our tiny corner of a planet in the universe is conducive to life. Therefore, something must have designed it. It's why does all of this vast stuff exist that's non-conducive to life if it was designed for life? As Stephen Hawking pointed out, if the universe is fine-tuned for anything, it's fine-tuned for creating black holes because that's what it does a lot.
It's very good at that, yes.
It's very, very good at it. So I don't get that, but my entire point with this is instead of saying, hey, this is the argument that sort of pushes back against this, he's saying, hey, look up this and Google it. And here's how I beat somebody with what you would Google. You know, he's not actually addressing it. And if you've got time to regale us with a story about your victories, you've got time to say the counter argument.
Yeah, I mean, I read, the first paragraph in 25 seconds?
Yeah.
Watching. And an atheist actually brought up the anthropic principle and described things and tried to address them from a naturalistic perspective. I thought it was entertaining.
That's not an argument.
I thought it was entertaining. I mean, I find philosophical digressions into what ifs and why and could is love the reason for everything. Like it's interesting, but it doesn't settle many debates, Yeah,
I don't understand how that's an argument. The planet must be conducive to life because life exists. Well, God did it. And then his argument is, someone addressed it once and I found it entertaining. That's cool. Your argument?
Cool story. But yeah, it's a fascinating comparison because, like, Matt's over here saying the whole universe has to have a creator because it's fine-tuned for human life to exist at one little planet in the universe, yada, yada. But we can do sort of a reverse argumentum absurdum on it by looking at just Earth, the place where we actually do live.
Right.
Like we know from studying geology and paleobiology and so forth, that the Earth's atmosphere, for example, which we need to exist, did not always be this way. Like proto-Earth, it was freaking orange and shit. And then the anorexic bacteria. Anaerobic. I knew it was the wrong word.
Anorexic bacteria probably wouldn't survive. I think evolutionarily
they probably
speaking,
would not.
They would probably be wiped out. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I had to make that joke. I'm sorry. It's really not. It's not a laughing matter, but yeah.
It's true. I mean, I struggle with that a bit myself, but yeah. The anaerobic bacteria, they did their thing. They pooped out oxygen. They got the oxygen apocalypse, whatever. Gradually, the sky turned blue. So we know the Earth changed, but saying it's a big change that created the facets and factors and elements necessary for us to exist later.
Correct. Yes.
Means a God must have done it. Means you now have to explain two creations. You have the creation of the universe, and then you have the transmogrification of Earth to be habitable for humans. Was there a smaller God who did the Earth, or was it the same God twice? And why didn't he make the Earth correctly in the first place? I have many questions.
Well, I mean, presumably you're saying, or it's saying that, you know, God created the plants and animals, so he created the plants. So that's a really good point. If he created like the plants on day one, and didn't he create the animals first? I can't remember. Hold on, let me just grab the NIV.
The plants were on day 3, and the sun was on day 4.
Right. And then he created animals. So, you know, in a few days, you'd have to say that the you know, if you want to argue that God created the plants and therefore he knew that they would produce oxygen for the animals coming later, if you're a fundamentalist, i.e. somebody that believes in the literal word of the Bible, like Matt Slick, you would have to say that he created plants and they oxygenated the entire planet in a couple of days. Push X to doubt? Like, can I just doubt that? There were super plants.
I mean, you know, after the arc, evolution ran super fast. So why can't you have like super fast photosynthesis even without a sun?
Maybe.
Why not?
Yeah, why not? I mean, well, we're making crap up. Let's just go hog wild. Let's do it. Let's just say there were magic plants for sure.
I mean, we're making shit out of dust and ribs and all sorts of crazy things. Why not?
Yeah. But yeah, that's a good point. Like, you know, yeah.
That's not the anthropic principle. Yes, it is. That's not the anthropic principle, Matt. You're talking about the fine-tuning argument. That's what you're talking about. And Vic Stenger, in his book, anthropic principle applies as one of the possible stances toward that. But the fine-tuning of the initial constants, which some people say, look at the odds of it happening by chance are so infinitesimal, there must have been design. But that's the opposite of design. Supposedly, God can create angels and anything he wants to, but suddenly now he's limited to these tiny little, you know, values that he must follow. It seems like God's more of a slave if he's limited by fine-tuning. And by the way, the fine-tuning argument presupposes evolution. It presupposes a very long existing universe with billions of years. So it's not a good argument for a God. In fact, many of these constants were not fine-tuned at all. And when the multiverse comes into its own, it completely disappears.
Jester for $2. Thank you, Jester. Sorry, we already broke the X button in chat. Ah, damn it. Look, okay, just get a new keyboard. But the like button still works. So that's down there. Okay. How was that segue? Was that smooth? Was that
was very, very nice? Yes. And while you're down there, there's a couple other buttons you can press, like the subscribe button, and also join memberships, and you can play with all these fun emojis like I have access to,
emojis.
Like the sus button and the legendary banhammer and other fun things. There's a bunch of them.
Maybe I should have used the sus emoji for that one, you know, like
right. And there's membership streams and all kinds of cool things. So yeah, there's things to click.
Yeah, like it seems like, you know, Dan's right. He's using the fine-tuning argument as the anthropic principle, and fine-tuning is an explanation of the anthropic principle, but it's not the anthropic principle. He's taking it as a given, not a argument. You know, and that argument may be true. Dan's not saying, hey, that argument is false. But there's a lot of reasons why that doesn't seem to be the case. You know, the fine-tuning argument doesn't seem to be the case for at least us on this planet. It's because life is a lot more durable under different conditions. It doesn't need to be these conditions. And there's probably better conditions for even for our own lives. Like there's probably better conditions that we could be living under, where the seasons don't fluctuate as much, where there aren't long snowy winters where we freeze to death. There's probably better conditions that the planet could be in, but it has these conditions and we seem adapted to these conditions and where on the planet you actually come from. Seems to be the case. But yeah, fix your X button, Jester.
Maybe Z is close enough.
Maybe. Look, I'll permit it just this once.
Dan, this question is for you. If God were to provide evidence for himself that you can't refute, forcing you to believe in him, would you want him to do so?
Yeah, I think so. I'm a creator. I've created some children. 5 children. I don't know if I should brag about that, but 5. They're great children. They're all really good children. And if they would like some evidence that I care for them and love them, then I'm going to give it to them. If they ask me, even the Bible says, if your child asks you for a loaf of bread, are you going to give them a stone? But what we've gotten from Matt tonight are stones, basically. We don't have any loaf of bread. We don't have any real good evidence. So
don't forget, Dan Barker was a preacher. He was a
preacher.
Damn
good one, too.
He probably knows the Bible a lot better than Matt Slick. I've not heard that before.
Yeah, that's some good shit. You should hear Dan Barker also creates secular gospel music now. He's always been a very musically talented person. He did the church music when he was a preacher. Now, because so many people who've left the church miss the music, he makes secular gospel music. I found out about it on he was doing a thing with Mandisa. They were going to Africa to set up some secular communities that are basically, they have the community aspect of church without being church, and so they're including the secular gospel music, and it's fucking delightful.
Alex, I just love this comment. Alex, Mark, we're adapted to the region we find ourselves in. Also, Mark lives in Australia. Look, one thing, I haven't really, I've traveled the world a little bit. I've spoken with people overseas, but until I started on this wild internet journey that I'm on, this YouTube journey, I haven't really known that well people in other countries and stuff. And one thing about, like, when you know Australians is they do have their, they are singularly got this weird thing that they do. I mean, people think we're absolutely nuts because we've got this sort of just this disregard for danger, like just a unhealthy disregard for any danger we're in kind of thing. People call us crazy, and it's not that. But one thing you do notice, for instance, World War II, Australian soldiers were called by Rommel, who was the German, the enemy commander, some of the best soldiers in the world because of just how tough they were, how uncompromising. They were just unrelenting. Like, basically, it was reported that he said that if I were to take hell, I would take it with Australians and I would hold it with New Zealanders. That's what Rommel described as the best infantry in the world.
As long as they're not fighting emus.
As long as, look, that was a lost cause. I dare you to fight an emu and come out on top. All right, that was a
fight an emu. I grew up on a farm. We had emus.
Oh, no.
And there's a fun thing about emus. They are one of their idiosyncrasies as a species is they are sexually attracted to humans. And a full-grown emu is like 7-8 feet tall.
Yeah, that's scary. That's scary. Well, at least it wasn't a cassowary.
You have to fight the emus.
Yeah. At least it wasn't a cassowary, all right? At least it wasn't a cassowary. But one thing you'll notice is that the descendants of people from the lower classes in Australia who generally, like myself, had ancestors that were convicts, are a pretty tough breed, right? We have guys going out there into the bush, like, really, really tough guys. There's a reason for that. It's because as a convict, you kind of didn't survive if you weren't a bit tough, basically, if you couldn't survive under harsh conditions. So we're descended from those people, the lower classes of Australia. So, we are adapted to the environment, because if you couldn't adapt to the Australian environment as a convict, you weren't hanging around for long at all.
It's a selection pressure.
Well, as I like to point out, it isn't only slaves that were taken to new worlds in chains. Convicts were as well. The difference is that convicts could work for their freedom. That's the difference. That was something that was not given to the slaves.
We atheists are not fighting the concept of God. It's not like we've got our heads stuck in the sand. No, there's no God. No, I'm not going to listen to you. If there's a God, that would be an amazing thing to know. We would all like to know that.
Yeah.
Scientists are not devising these arguments to try to avoid believing in a God, because if there's a God, then I'm going to have some moral restraints. I'm not going to be able to live like I want. So I'm not going to believe in God. You hear that a lot. Atheists get attacked a lot. Like, you don't believe in God because you don't want any moral restraints on your life. So yes, evidence, I think, is basic. Science, if you want to boil down science to one word, how would you do it? What word would you say to describe science?
Oh, that's a good question. What word would you say to describe science? I would say falsifiability. Maybe?
My internet glitched again. It's being very rude today.
Yeah. Maybe you should pray for better internet. Maybe that will work.
I should. Send thoughts and prayers, folks. Maybe the
Thoughts
gods
and
will
prayers.
bless us with
Yes, that's how we fix an internet connection in the world of networking. Yes, we pray over it, because that always does not work at all.
I mean, I just prayed my video cable back into working order. Like 10 minutes before showtime, my monitor just went out. Like, just snow on the screen and nothing. So I turned my tower around and I disconnected the HDMI from the converter gizmo and plugged it directly into the port, and it came back on. So I made a change that doesn't actually matter, and it works because I prayed and gave a sacrifice of the cord connector, which is only here because sometimes the HDMI port doesn't work and I have to move it to another port, which doesn't. It's one of these half HDMI things. I don't know. It's just whatever. But hey, we're here. Hooray!
We're here. Well, I mean, I think after I die, I'll take up a job in heaven and be, welcome to heaven, IT. Have you tried condemning it and blessing it again?
Yes.
Have you tried condemning it and praying for it again?
Yeah, just,
Sorry,
just
that's a
sprinkle some blood. It'll be fine.
Yeah. Have you tried a burnt offering? Have you tried a burnt offering? It works.
Consider the fucking flesh-scented goat candles.
Yeah, it works all the time, 40% of the time. Absolutely. Yeah.
One word. Observation. Basically, you can have all these hypotheses, you can have all these ideas, you can have all this math, you can have all these, but basically, the ether was disproved by observation. The Higgs boson was hypothesized, but scientists said we have a high level of confidence, but it was finally confirmed by observation. So if there is a God.
Yeah, so maybe the word would be empiricism. Maybe that would be the word, empirical, like having empirical data. Like, so empiricism is the idea that in order to know anything, you've got to confirm it with your senses. That's the only way to know anything. So, and everybody uses this all the time. Like, if you want to know where your keys are, you don't just decide in your head. You've got to use an empirical sense to know where they are. That's the only way you can find out. That's how we verify things. But sort of appealing to something that is unfalsifiable. You can't check if it does or does not exist. You can't know that that's a thing, because if you can't test it to know it's not there, what is the difference between something imaginary that can't be tested and something real that can't be tested? Like, from our perspective, what's the difference? They look exactly the same, and all of the arguments are the same. Everything's the same. There's no difference at all. So yeah, I think Jesus is imaginary. No, you know,
and at that point, it doesn't actually matter because it's a non-factor.
Yep.
Confirmation would come through some kind of observation.
Matt, would you like to respond?
But Dan, you said that the scientific method is the only trustworthy means of obtaining knowledge. That's losing faith in faith, page 133. If you use that...
That's losing faith in faith. There's got to be a circular argument there somewhere, doesn't there?
I mean, it sounds contradictory, but I think that's a book title.
Is it his book title? That would be
book by Dan Barker. And according to Matt
is
here,
he trying to... Yeah,
it's page 133. Now I don't have a copy, so I don't think I can find specifically page 133.
Yeah, no, I think that he's having a dig at Dan, which is fine. I mean, Dan had a dig at him. That's totally cool. But you know, losing faith in faith. Well, yeah, like faith isn't a reason to believe anything. To me, I mean, it depends what you mean by faith. If you're talking about a justification that relies on empirical evidence, well, sure, but I wouldn't use that faith to describe that. And that's not how the Bible defines faith. The Bible says faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things unseen. And there's an error there, right? That things hoped for don't have substance, and things unseen aren't evident. They're not evidence, right? So it's kind of this thing of like saying, well, it's the sound of colors. It doesn't apply to these things. Now, you might mean something different. You might mean, you know, a confidence based in the evidence that you have. But to me, that doesn't sound like faith. That just sounds like, you know, justified confidence. It doesn't sound like faith to me.
Yeah, because faith is when you don't have those things. Because if you do have those things, you don't need faith.
Right. Faith is sort of the filler gap between the weak evidence and your strong belief, right? So you have weak evidence, you have all of these stories, you have, you know, feelings that you've had that you think are the Holy Ghost. Sure, yeah, I'm not denying your experience, that you've experienced something. But in order to fill that gap between this weak evidence and that strong faith, that strong belief, that really strong belief, that's where faith shores it up. That it basically makes, you know, if somebody from another religion said, "Oh, well, I have these stories from you know, the Iraq, and I have a feeling that Allah has given me," you would go, "No, that's incredibly weak evidence. It's the same stuff you have." Oh, but miracles, they have them too. So in order to shore up that weak evidence that you know is weak, because you wouldn't believe it if anybody else told you about another God, the same evidence, that's where faith comes in. It's basically this, you know, it basically amplifies the weak evidence in your own mind, so it becomes this overwhelming thing that you can believe.
Methodology, then you can't validate its own statement without contradicting yourself, without begging the question, actually. Now, logically, if God provided sufficient evidence, then you'd have to believe. If you jump high enough, can you touch the moon? Yes. Otherwise, you haven't jumped high enough. The question requires the affirmative answer.
What? Hang on. I'm gonna reverse that. I'm sorry. I didn't even understand any of that.
Yeah,
if you use that methodology.
Sorry?
He missed some connecting bits. Like he went directly from a statement to an analogy to a metaphor without explaining why the one has anything to do with the other.
Yeah.
Kind of observation.
Matt, would you like to respond?
But Dan, you said that the scientific method is the only trustworthy means of obtaining knowledge. That's losing faith in faith, page 133.
Well, it's not the scientific method. You know, it doesn't have to be the scientific method, but we want a reliable method, and the scientific method is proven to be the most reliable we currently have. If you have a better method of showing what is real and what isn't, please, I'm open to it. Like, seriously, if you can beat the scientific method on reliability for determining truth about the world around us, I'm all ears. I think that, you know, but Christians talk about the power of discernment, and they're usually the most easily tricked people out there. They talk about how amazing their ability to find the truth is, and their church hasn't told us anything about the world around us in the entire time. They just keep repeating the same stories.
Well, they have told us things, but every single time we check on those things, they turn out to be incorrect. Like, the world is flat, and we will, and the sun goes around it, and we'll burn you at the stake if you disagree. But we don't talk about Bruno.
Mm. Yeah. So it does say a lot of things, but, you know, I'm really talking about what, you know, the knowledge that we have now about, like, bacteria and how to fly and how oceans work and all this stuff. What's any church done to add to that repertoire of knowledge? Nothing. All it does is has its stories and its beliefs and tries to fit what the scientific method has discovered into those stories. Like, just back them up with science somehow. Yeah.
If you use that methodology, then you can't validate its own statement without contradicting yourself, without begging the question, actually.
So is he talking about losing faith in faith? Is he talking about, like, you can't say losing faith in faith? Or is he talking about the scientific method has to validate itself?
I'm not sure. I think he's referencing the book, but he could be using that as a springboard kind of thing.
Well, I think I'll be sort of, you know, I think I'll be generous and sort of give him the benefit of the doubt that he's saying, hey, we need to do science to validate science that it works. So he might be going for a problem of induction kind of thing, because science does use induction. It uses the constant repetition of things to say, hey, that will happen in the future, so we can have knowledge that that is the way things are. I think that's what he's getting at, but he's not making it very clear. Is CBAS C science?
I can't say for sure. I don't know, but I just checked Seabass's channel, and it's been around since 2006. There's videos of Elden Ring gameplay and such on it.
Okay.
It doesn't mean it isn't, but there's nothing that shows.
Yeah. No, I won't ban an Elden Ring player. I did an entire playthrough of Elden Ring. Cosplaying. I've got a gaming channel. I've just started it back up. I won't be doing it regularly, but I do have one. So yeah, sorry, I don't mean to. If you know somebody's an Elden Ring player. I cosplayed an entire playthrough as King Leonidas of the Spartans, and look, it's no joke, mate. Like, no joke when you put some, you know, I'm not a speed runner or anything, but it was hard. It was really good though. I really enjoyed it. But so no worries. Just checking. Just that we have some trolls coming in occasionally to disrupt things and make things hard on everybody, and we're not interested. If you are just a theist and you want to have, you know, intelligent, reasonable conversations, that's fine. That's totally fine. All your brothers love that game. It's challenging. It makes me cry. It's amazing. I love it. Like, you get you get the full range of emotions, human girl. You know, from despair to love to hate to you know, victory and triumph. It's challenging, but it's rewarding, I think. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, the problem with induction. I think that Karl Popper mostly solved the problem of induction. So Hume, who was the sort of Kant's antithesis, had this problem with induction. So if we have things happening over and over and over again, we're kind of assuming they will keep happening into the future because they've happened in the past. Well, that's induction. So you're essentially proving induction with induction, right? Which is a problem. However, Karl Popper came up with falsifiability, right? That if you keep doing it, it's true when it stops. It's not true when it stops working, right? So if you're dropping a pen over and over and over, what Karl Popper posited is you keep dropping it until such a time as it doesn't work. And up until then, you can rely on it to work. He basically, there's a sort of question there. How do you know a billion years into the future you'll drop the pen and it will still drop? Well, you don't. That's why you have to keep testing it. Ongoing testing of these premises is what sort of gets around induction. Not 100%, but it mostly shores it up.
It fits with experience.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it looks beautiful. It's a harsh mistress. I'll tell you that right now, human girl. It is a harsh mistress. It's like a gorgeous dominatrix. Yeah, it looks beautiful. It will hurt you.
Only if you pay enough.
I did pay for it. I loved every second, quite frankly, yes. I'm talking about Elden Ring, not the dominatrix, okay? Let's make that perfectly clear.
Logically,
and her name is not Barbara. I'm joking.
33. If you use that methodology, then you can't validate its own statement without contradicting yourself, without begging the question, actually. Now, logically, if God provided sufficient evidence, then you'd have to believe. If you jump high enough, can you touch the moon? Yes. Otherwise, you haven't jumped high enough.
So if God provided enough evidence, you would have to believe. No?
Coming from a guy who has been presented with mountains of evidence and refuses to believe it, that's obviously not true.
Did God provide enough evidence that the world is a globe? Because I think he did, if that's your statement, right? But there's people that don't believe it. There's people that don't believe this reality is real. I mean, talk about an overwhelming abundance of evidence, but they still don't think this reality is real. Some people don't think birds are real. Some people don't think Australia is real. I would say I have an overwhelming amount of evidence, but no.
Well, of course you would say that.
But this is so interesting that you get this counter to, oh, well, atheists wouldn't believe even if we presented all the evidence in the world. They would just say it's a hallucination or something. So how does that square away with that, man? That atheists just won't believe no matter how much evidence we present, and God could present enough evidence that you would believe. Well, why doesn't he do that? There's a problem here. If God wants people to believe that he exists and does not provide the evidence that he knows is there and can provide, presumably, it's just a mere triviality for God to provide that evidence because he's omnipotent. He can do anything he wants, but he doesn't do it. Then he must not want everyone to believe. Does he only want the credulous to believe? The people that will believe based upon weak evidence? Is that it?
Well,
is that his design?
The preachers who want your money.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Details, though.
But it's so weird, though, saying, well, God wants you to believe he exists, but he's not going to give you the evidence for it. You've got to have faith instead. Why? Like, why? If God is the most rational being, and he knows that rationally we need strong, supported evidence to believe he exists, and he can provide that evidence, then why would he think that not providing that evidence that he knows rationally that we would need would be a good thing to make us believe? It's wild. It's such a weird thing to do. And then he has the temerity to go, well, I know rationally they'd need strong evidence. I'm going to torture them because I wouldn't give them the evidence that would lead them to believe.
But he loves you.
But he loves you. Wild, absolutely wild arguments. And I might add that, I shouldn't rant on. This is turning into an absolute rant. I don't understand this argument at all. Like, I don't understand it. Like, you could believe in God and still not worship and follow Jesus, right? I could believe that Jesus and, I could believe that God is real and that he's a complete tyrant that needs, to have some psychological counseling for his clear anger management issues. I could believe that. And I wouldn't, be a follower of Jesus and get into heaven because I wouldn't, have put my sins on him. So he's not affecting free will if he shows that he exists. You have to believe in him, not just believe he exists in order to get into heaven. So I don't understand. Do you have anything to add to that wildly Australian rant?
My internet glitched through most of it, but I know it's the freaking worst. I'm thinking about trying to run without my camera on. Maybe that'll help. Probably not, but
I don't know. We'll give it a try if you want. Yeah.
I mean, I feel prettier than average today, so I kind of want the camera on. But if I need to keep the internet connection, we can try it for a little while, I suppose.
No, okay.
I'll be invisible like a ninja.
Like a god.
Question requires the affirmative answer. We can discuss other issues that you brought up, but the logic is it requires the affirmative yes.
That's his answer. Oh, wow. Oh, sir. What are you doing? We could talk about the other issues you brought up, but I don't feel like it. That's the only one I'm going to bring up. That you can't jump to the moon, but if you jump higher and higher, you can.
I mean, well, yeah, like Dan said, it's a deipity. It's if you could jump high enough, could you touch the moon? Yeah. If you could jump that high, you could. And in fact, we've done that. It was technologically assisted, much like many of the other things we do.
Okay.
Yeah. Jester,
just 1 second.
The first rule of Ninja Club is we don't talk about Ninja Club. Also, the second rule, weirdly enough.
I'm really sorry. I'm trying to be, I'm not trying to be pejorative. And I think, I at least try to give credit where credit due, where there's a good answer. But that answer was pitiful. It was absolutely terrible. It basically said, hey, you're begging the question. What question is he begging? What question is he begging? I don't understand.
Well, Mark, could you lift a mountain if you were strong enough to lift a mountain?
Yes. But that doesn't address what Dan's... I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but does that address in any remote way what Dan said?
No. It dismisses, it dodges, it deflects.
It does not address it.
Yeah.
Like, science is the best way of discovering things. Yeah, because we discover things and confirm them. Oh, but you've got to beg the question for it?
I mean, you could look at that the other way. I look at science as like the best way for ruling things out that aren't the things, you know? Like, we do generate new hypotheses as a result of answers to previous questions we've asked. So, yeah, it does lead us to new ideas, which we then test and so on and so forth. But, you know, the whole premise of the scientific method is to disconfirm things that are wrong.
Yeah, I will agree with that. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Matt, an audience member would like you to define morality.
Oh, what's your definition of morality, Ember?
Ooh, my definition of morality. Oh, that's a tough one because I'm not a fan of morality. I tend to be more ethics sided, like what works for society sort of thing. But
no, you're an ethicist. That's totally fine. Totally fine.
Yeah. Generally morality is the priorities that you value. The more moral action is the higher priority. Like, you know, if say, for example, you value art and you value human life. Probably the more moral thing would be to have human life have a higher value. So if you come across a museum that's on fire, the moral thing would be to save the humans, preferentially. The art if you can, but the humans first. So it's the prioritization of values is morality.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I was just going to say that's a very long definition. I think that morality to me, I mean, I would take it from Stanford Encyclopedia, just the code of conduct acceptable to all reasonable or rational people, whether that's across the society or individually, that's basically up for grabs. They also distinguish morality in two different contexts. Like there's descriptive morality, where you're saying, hey, the morality of Japan is X, Y, and Z, you're describing it. And then there's normative, where you're saying, hey, the morality that ought to be, like the one that has to be done is this one. That is morality. So there's two different ways of using the word. So first off, I would be asking, what do you mean? Do you mean descriptively or do you mean normatively? Is the first thing I'd be asking.
Valid.
But yeah, but you know, I presume he means normatively. That's sort of usually the way people are using it in debates like this. They're usually not saying, hey, the morality of Japan and the morality of the US in regards to taking your shoes off when you enter a house is different. You know, that's descriptive. It's not normative, as in what is the ought when you enter a house. You know, what should be agreed upon by all rational people.
Question. I don't know if I really can. That's a good question. I never really thought about that. What is morality? It is the action, quality.
I'm sorry, you've never really thought about it. Isn't he supposed to be a philosopher or something like that?
I've never thought about well, he's also a theist, a presuppositionalist, and a Calvinist. Of course, he has never in his life thought about morality.
I just think he doesn't know what morality is, because everybody's thought about morality, right? Like it's something that is kind of unavoidable, because anytime you go, hey, that's really bad behavior, or hey, they ought to have done this, that would be a lot better. That's morality. So you may not have thought of the things that you've thought about as morality, but but I would expect somebody who's doing debates on God and taking an attitude of how you ought to live your life, right? What principles ought you live by? The fact that they haven't thought about morality is that is mind-blowing. That is mind-blowing.
Let's see, nature of doing with that which is, I'm going to do it this way, you may not like this, consistent with the quality of God's essence and his holiness, and that which is good is defined by relationship to him. I know where you're going to go with this. And that which contradicts his nature is not. So we could get into some more depth on that, because that's a very good question, but it would take about a half hour to an hour to go through various levels and iterations of some of the concepts associated with it.
Oh, I nailed Alex at Wi-Fi Gospel to the wall with a similar answer recently, but to that one, like that is a bad answer, sir. because you're appealing to God's nature. There's a lot of actions that are in God's nature that are pretty bad.
Yeah, which, I mean, oh my goodness, there's so much. We could list all the examples. We don't need to. Everybody knows. But this is why Matt Dillahunty has this famous gotcha. He drops less frequently than he used to because he doesn't want to get it, too worn out. But he'd ask something like, "Do you think it's moral to beat your slave, and as long as he doesn't die immediately, everything is fine?" And the person inevitably says, "Of course not. You shouldn't even have slaves, let alone beat them." And then Matt says, "Congratulations, you are more moral than your perfectly moral God."
Apparently, Matt was being sarcastic by saying he'd never thought about it. Yeah, that's odd. He didn't sound sarcastic. I probably would have said, "Wow, I've never thought about that." That's sarcasm. He seems to have a problem. Maybe it's me. Maybe my ASD is sort of, I can't recognize sarcasm. Let me ask somebody who's maybe neurotypicals out there can tell me whether that's sarcasm or not.
So with that, because it's a disadvantage to be able to answer that in 2 minutes or less, I'm going to let him do that and make me look bad. Go ahead.
Well, what you just described is the opposite of morality. It's the Nuremberg defense. Morality boils down to following the orders of the slave master, the God, the dictator, the Lord, which means that you believers don't have any basis for moral judgments within yourself.
That's an interesting approach, in that if humans do not have the capacity for morality and have to rely on God to give it to them, which incidentally contradicts the creation story in Eden, when God specifically prohibited humans from having access to that knowledge, but that's a whole other story, then how do we know the divine command is moral?
Well, you're presupposing that God's nature is morally good. And sort of, it's almost like a definitional argument. I'm going to define God's nature as good, therefore whatever follows God's nature is good, basically. That's what you're doing, essentially. I don't like this answer, because the reason why is, if this was so are you familiar with the Euthyphro dilemma?
Yeah, that's the if do we worship the gods because they're worthy, or are they worthy because we worship them? Roughly.
Right. That was the original Euthyphro. It's sort of been sort of updated and sort of refined as it goes along to be something like, are things good because God tells us they're good for humans to do, or does morality come from some other place? Right. And that is the dilemma. And Alex in my debate sort of said, "Oh, that's not a dilemma." Yes, it is. Right. The dilemma is it God saying so, or not God saying so, right? So that is the dilemma. There is only two choices. There's no third option, right? It either comes from God saying so or some other place. That is the dilemma. And he appealed to God's nature. Now, if it was God saying, "Hey, this is good, and I'm telling you what to do that is good," Dan would have a point. It is a might makes right situation at that point. Because God is the most powerful, he's just laying down the law. He's just telling everybody what they should do at essentially the point of a gun, or the point, aiming hell at them and telling them what to do, right? Like, he's really just
I created a torture dimension just for you.
Exactly. Yeah. Please point that thing away from my face. Look, he's basically just a might makes right principle at that point. And Dan would have an absolute point in that case. When you're talking about something's nature, you're really saying that the fundamental essence of something, the fundamental essence of my nature is kind of everything I do and everything that is me, kind of thing. That's essentially the nature of something. It's its properties and its powers, essentially. So if you're appealing to God's nature, I mean, that's fine. I don't think that applies, because if God's nature is sort of good, and that is what is good, is in alignment with his nature, it's not him dictating something. It's coming from somewhere else other than his opinion, right? But the problem then comes, well, what's in God's nature, right, that you're getting your morality from? It's God's nature to give malaria to babies. It's in God's nature to drown the entire human species, except for 8 people on a boat. It's in God's nature to kill someone's family just to see if he's worshipping you. That's in God's nature, according to the Christian doctrine, right? Because God does all of these things. That's in his nature. So the question then becomes, well, why is that not moral if it's in God's nature?
Right. Like if I go running around murdering entire families and I say, well, it has to be moral because God did it, therefore it's in God's nature, therefore it's moral, I'm still going to jail.
Yeah. Yeah, but you know, you can go to jail and things can still be moral.
Well, yeah,
right?
that's true too, but that's,
Well,
sort of
for
tangential.
instance, like I'll point out Nelson Mandela, one of the people I consider to be a great man. He went to jail, and he was also acting perfectly morally, trying to end apartheid in South Africa, like, you know, and did great things for his country. So I don't think that's necessarily the case that just the legal system is morality. But and I know you don't think that. It's just, yeah, I think you could be perfectly moral and still end up in jail, as we've seen all the time. But you know, all of these things, if I decide that I want to wipe out an entire, you know, race of people, why is that not in God's nature? Because it is. He has done it. He's commanded humans to do it. It is in his nature to facilitate that. And you might go, oh, well, just 1 second. Sorry, Amber. I just want to get this out. You might say, hey, but that's not for humans to do. That's for gods to do. Okay, fine. But you're not following his nature, right?
Yeah. And what I was going to add on is this additional doctrinal concept that God's nature is unknowable. And so if morality is God's nature and God's nature is unknowable, then morality is unknowable. So
that's a good point.
What are we doing?
What are we doing? And we're sort of back to, how do we implement you know, if morality is unknowable, then we're back to relative morality. How do we implement this in a way to benefit people and make a working society? Because that's sort of what we want. It sort of does come back to just as an atheist would go about morality. And you might say, hey, because God's is unknowable, maybe we appeal to biological imperatives, survival imperatives. We appeal to pro-social drives as morality. I don't subscribe to that myself, but I understand why people do. Maybe you appeal to that. Like then we're back in the same boat at that point.
We do like our boats, except the, fake ones in Kentucky.
Actually, and that might be a great place if you want to take a very short break. And thank you, to segue into coming up is the Kentucky atheist, because I know that is in Kentucky, okay? I'm not completely ignorant of the United States, okay? I'm not completely ignorant of it, but in Kentucky, there is a big boat on concrete that apparently saved humans, or a replica of the one that saved humans, which is hilarious because it like got water damage at one point. I think that's just hilarious. Like, that is hilarious.
Yeah,
but,
I'm sure the real arc is on a concrete scaffolding. Absolutely.
Maybe. You don't know. You don't know.
Were you there?
Were you there? Sorry, just 1 second. And Sorry about that. Okay.
Yeah. No, it was a great place to put the ad. But I should note the necessary postscript. The guest list has changed a bit. Vice Rhino not coming because border issues. He's Canadian and he doesn't want to risk coming into the U.S. and getting deported to El Salvador.
That's a good point.
Yeah, Aaron Ra had to cancel for reasons, but whether I can physically make it or not, already pre-recorded my talk, and Joe has a copy. So whether I'm physically there or not, I will be speaking. So
there's an
I'm taking
updated one.
Aaron's
Yeah,
place.
I didn't see the updated one from 2 weeks ago. Anyway, go over to the Kentucky
even that's out of
Atheist.
date already.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, I mean, then
and Jay Bundy's coming too.
Oh, and Jay Bundy's on board. Look, Dr. Jay Bundy, fantastic scientist, evolutionary biologist, and has worked at the Lenski Labs. What a guy! And can wrestle a Hovend any day of the week. You give it to him. What a guy! What a guy! I mean, yeah. Look, okay. So look, seriously, this misinformation that's going around. There's a problem with crime in South Africa, yes, but I'm talking about apartheid. Like, for Christ's sake, apartheid in the 80s, if you're too young to remember it, was not white farmers being attacked. Okay, it wasn't. I think that white farmers were doing pretty well during that time. I don't know what that's got to do with anything, quite frankly, but sure, pivot to something completely unrelated. Matt Slick does. All right, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, head over. Did the Kentucky Atheist channel? Yes. Okay, awesome.
Having to look out to some orders to tell you what to do, in which case nothing is right and nothing is wrong. Everything just boils down to the whim of the mind of some deity who just declares, because somehow he's holy and he needs to be glorified.
Yeah, I think this is not a good answer. I think that he's sort of saying, hey, the mind instead of the nature of something, right? So certain things aren't a decision of my mind to declare. Like, for instance, it's in my nature to, for my heart to beat, for instance. That's in my nature. But I can't decide. Like, it's not like I decide that with my mind. So, there's I don't think this is a good answer. I think Dan's sort of really answered badly, because it's not like, if you appeal to God's nature, it's not a declaration of him deciding what is good and what is bad. Ember, you're muted if you're trying to talk.
I am muted. Yes, I was looking up this farmers thing, and there's a new story from May 15th. Apparently the day after the refugees came to the US. The what do they call it? The Nampo Harvest Day Trade Fair, which is an annual agricultural exhibition considered the largest in the Southern Hemisphere, met in South Africa. Over 4 days, the attendees discussed innovations in technology, collaborations, and various other elements of an industry that last year generated nearly $14 billion equivalent in revenue. Notably, according to one participant, there was no discussion of violence against white farmers. Because it's not happening.
Yeah, so these farm attacks, basically the Minister for South Africa says that sort of South Africa's police minister said that 69.7% of attack victims were farmers or their families, and 61.6% of victims were white. So yes, but it's probably because there's a lot more white people on farms than black people. That's the thing. And I think last year it was 50 people, not the 400 that they're trying to say. And if you look, like, South Africa has a real problem with murders in its country. It does. Like, no one's saying that it doesn't. but sort of picking out these ones and saying, oh, it's some kind of like what did Trump say, a genocide? No, it isn't. Like it's not right. Don't get me wrong. I think that those people should absolutely be caught and prosecuted under South African law. But you know, it's like, what are you talking about? And you know, there's a whole bunch of a whole bunch of black people dying over there as well, and I don't see any problem with that. You know, you don't have any problem with that. It's just the white people that we care about. Yeah, just the white people. So the black people on farms, we don't care if they get killed. It's just the white farmers you care about. That's nice of you.
White,
yeah, I agree.
makes right.
I agree. It's pretty fucked in South Africa. No, I agree. I totally agree. But, you know, it's been fucked in South Africa for a long time. Like, it's not a new thing. And under apartheid, black people were being absolutely slaughtered or locked up in camps for simply protesting against the government because they didn't have any rights. That, you know, you don't understand apartheid.
Just declared what's right and wrong.
Look, you're just disrupting the chat. So I suggest you drop it because you're not right on this. Do a fact check on what's actually happening. And I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying that, like, inflating the numbers and talking about this is a problem, because you don't care about black people being killed. You only care when it's white people. And that's a problem. Yeah, do a fact check. Okay, we'll drop it because this isn't what the thing is about, and you're just disrupting the chat at this point. Okay, so I don't want to have to time you out. I don't want to have to dingo, but that's not okay. All right. I don't have a fact check, but here. Just take 5 minutes, calm down, realize that, you know, I'm not playing here, and you know, this is my house. I talk about what I want. This is my house. You don't come into the house and shout over people. No. Look, he's not banned. He's just timed out to calm down, realize we're here to talk about a debate, and just, you know, realize this isn't, you know, this isn't the place for
it. We non-believers define morality, and I'll define it for myself, not for all atheists, as simply the intention to act in ways that minimize real harm in the real world. That's what morality means.
Dan?
Well, I think that you'd have to sort of meta-ethically define morality as that. And I'm not opposed to that, right? Like, that's fine. And I think that that's what a majority of people want. They want to have a life that does not have suffering in it, right? They want to mostly be well and have a content and fulfilled life. But I don't think that's not objectively the case. I don't think it is. Some people may disagree. Some atheists disagree. I spoke to Kaz, who disagrees pretty recently. But, you know, as long as we all agree on that, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because that's what we want.
Do you acknowledge the existence of any transcendence? And if so, how do you account for them?
Well, the word transcendent means just to go beyond. So that's a slippery word, right?
Mm-hmm.
In Matt's mind, transcendence equals supernatural. But we can use the word transcendent in many different ways. For example, I think the good values that exist in all the religions of the world, and they all have good values. Peace. Surprise, surprise, my religion talks about peace. Well, they all do. Love, joy, these values that we think, you know, Christianity has some peace in it, even though Jesus said, think not that I am come to send peace on earth. I came not to send peace but a sword. But these values that we find popping up in religion are actually values that transcend religion.
Yeah, absolutely. And it transcends boundaries. Like, you can say Médecins Sans Frontières, the Doctors Without Borders. It transcends borders. It's just a word that means it it goes beyond something. That's all it means. Now, the way that people like Matt Slick use it, they're like, well, transcendent has to mean to transcend into the supernatural. Why does it have to mean that? How do you know that it transcends into the supernatural? Like, they sort of have these words that they ascribe, they have usages that they use it for, and then pretend that that is the definition, the way that they're using it is what the word means. And that's not how we use words.
Yeah.
Like, I understand if somebody says, hey, I have a theory, I'm going, well, they're not talking scientifically. I don't, that's fine.
I'm also thinking of how the way Matt's describing his God, who cannot demonstrate himself, who cannot interact with physical reality, he's not transcendent because he's stuck in the spiritual God world. He can't cross over into this one. He's not transcending that boundary.
No, he can be, because if he has the capability of doing that, he does transcend it, right? So if he can do something in this world, he is transcendent. Okay, just like if it's like if you've got a presence in this world, you're transcending that boundary, right? Like, you're going beyond it. So the fact that he doesn't do things doesn't mean he can't. And Matt thinks he has. So Matt thinks that Jesus rose from the dead. So he has transcended that boundary.
I don't know. I mean, technically, I have the capability of visiting another country, but that doesn't mean that I am transnational. I'm still just in the US,
Yes. Yeah, that's true. But I don't think that's really what transcendent means.
I'm probably splitting hairs.
No. I get your point,
Yeah, on the main point, there are lots of things that transcend. Books that get translated into different languages, they've transcended the language they were written in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's right. Or like just a work of art might transcend its style, right? Like, you do something in an abstract style that transcends the style. It means it flows into something else.
Now I want to put on my Starry Night dress because Van Gogh fucking transcends.
Yeah. I think Evard Munch's The Scream would probably be more appropriate.
Yeah. The transcend
I love
culture. That shit is it's human. It is one of the peak human experiences.
Yeah.
It's not one of the positive peaks, but it is a peak human experience.
Yes, I agree that I am completely unreal. And having said that, I feel like an 80s kid all of a sudden. Oh, I'm unreal. Unreal, man. Unreal. Maybe 80s, 90s. I am unreal.
They're above and beyond religion. They are human.
Sorry?
It's radical.
It's radical, dude. It's a radical, dude. I feel like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle.
Values. So I think in that sense, we can use the word transcendence to show that if you separate out the transcendent human values from the religious, what's left, the dross that's left, these religious values are not good values. The religious values are divisive. Religious values cause war, how you should treat women, how you should dress, what food you should eat, what day of the week you should worship, what kind of art you should make. Stuff like that, or religious values, are bad values. The truly good values you find in religion are values that transcend the religion. As I said earlier, perhaps we could use the word transcendence to apply to the multiverse, which we're pretty much sure now there is a multiverse, although we're waiting for observation.
Oh, no. The math works, okay? They came up with maths, but, multiverse hypothesis or, multiversal theory may have been a bit stronger at this point because I think they kind of jumped the gun on that one, that the math worked. So they said, hey, that's got to be true. Well, just because the math works doesn't mean it's true. We need more than just, as I said, a logical confirmation. But, I mean, he's obviously not a physicist. He does philosophy, and so that's really not his area. I get
well,
that.
It's kind of the same thing. In fact, it's basically the same argument Dan has been making against Matt, that just because a thing logically is possible does not mean that it is actually real.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yep.
It's the
so
same
it is
thing.
logically possible. Even something that mathematically possible doesn't mean that it is actually real, right? We have to have more than that. We have to have confirmation, empirical confirmation for that. That's the problem, right?
Thank you.
So transcendence can be applied in a non-supernatural way.
I was talking out there a little while ago, and one person, as soon as I started talking about logic, brought up the magical sky god. And I asked, why would you bring up magic? And
does he just talk about other arguments that he's had and gone, well, I won this argument with a random audience member. Checkmate, atheists.
And then everyone clapped. I think that may be a thing he learned in apologetics school, because Greg Kokel talks about that a lot too. So Barely Bearable Atheist, whom you may be aware of because his channel's been blowing up a bit lately, but he also sponsors a bunch of other channels. You'll see him credited on the Skeptics videos. He's a member on my channel. He gets around, but he did a series on Greg Kokel's book Tactics, and he does a great breakdown of them. And one of the tactics is, when you don't have data, substitute anecdotes.
Right. And this is just, but in a debate, like an actual recorded debate, is that wise? I mean, that would be like somebody asking me, hey, well, where does morality come from if not God's nature? And me going, well, I was in a debate with this guy, Alex, and I completely refuted that question.
Huzzah!
Huzzah! Like, what is important is your ability to articulate your thought processes and the reasons why at that time. That's what's important. You can't assume that everybody's seen all of your former work, or that you can rely on somebody catching some random conversation you had in order to know the answer. And I get it's difficult because you've got to compress some very complex topics into some very small durations of time. But you can at least give an overview and say, hey, we can talk more about it if you want, or I can go into that further. Or you can say, I did a debate with Alex. Check it out if you want more information on it. But, that's basically it. Like, this is, but terrible. Wait, that's it? That's it? I just want to check that I'm not high.
I was talking out there a little while ago, and one person, as soon as I started talking about logic, brought up the magical sky god. And I asked, why would you bring up magic? And I forgot my point, actually. Hey, excuse me, I've had 5 hours sleep in 2 days, all right? You know what I did? I went blank. I'm sorry, but I did. I went blank on that one. So that does happen. But
excuses.
Holy crap. You would think if God wanted us to believe, he would give you some better arguments than, hey, I was talking to somebody in the audience who brought up magic, and I said, why would you appeal to magic?
And I forgot my point. Doesn't Paul say something along the lines of, don't prepare your speeches because in the moment the Holy Spirit will inspire you with the correct words to say?
Does he? I'm not sure. I'm not that, I'm not that big on the Bible. Perhaps. Does Paul say that? Because if it is, it's terrible advice. It's terrible advice.
But I'm pretty sure it's in there. I'd have to go scouring all 14 freaking letters to try to find it. That's a different specialty. But Yeah, that whole concept of the Holy Spirit inspiring. Does Matt lack the Holy Spirit, or
maybe?
Like,
I'm not privy to the Holy Spirit's decisions, quite frankly. So he might be.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, I have blankouts and derailing trains of thought and things. Less frequently the last couple of years, but it happens to all humans. But if you've got the Holy Spirit whispering in your ear what to say, like Cyrano, how does that happen?
Yeah. And well, I mean, the Bible also says if you get 2 or more Christians together to pray for something, you'll get it. How's that working out for them?
I mean, still no Jesus. They've been praying for him to show up for a while now.
Yeah, and it's weird because it's odd that all those school attacks and stuff haven't stopped happening, because we've been given thoughts and prayers for ages. Maybe they're not but sincere. Maybe Christians need to be more sincere. I blame Christians. They're not sincere enough.
That must be it.
Yeah.
That reminds me of Terry Pratchett's book Small Gods. How the God in the book incarnates every 100 years or so or whatever to, reinforces believers' faith, because that's how he gets his power. But in the book, he reincarnates as like a fucking little turtle.
Yeah.
Because nobody believes in him anymore. Their faith is all transferred to the authority and doctrine of the church, not the God itself. And it's kind of, what if that's the problem with Christianity? Their prayers aren't working because they're not actually devoted to Jesus. They're devoted to the doctrines under Jesus's name.
Yeah, I have no idea. Like, seriously, that I don't think that, I mean, yeah. But that means that he allowed them to write it down, knowing that. Then again, that character in Small Gods wasn't particularly bright. What was it? Ohm, I think his name was. Was it Ohm? Or like O-M?
The god was Ohm, or Am, because the country was Amarià. Yeah.
That's right. That god wasn't particularly bright, and that was a parody of the okay. We've got a live one. We've got a live one. I don't know if you're hearing what I'm saying, but here, have 15 minutes or 10 minutes. That's good. And think about it some more of what's happening here when I say, hey, we're going to drop this subject because it's not what we're talking about and you're disrupting the chat. Maybe ruminate on what that means. Maybe pray about it. What does it mean, oh God, when the host of the show says, we're not talking about that at this point in time, we're talking about this debate and you're disrupting the chat? Maybe pray for a miracle of understanding. Maybe use that power of discernment you guys are so pleased about to sort of, realize what I'm saying, because it doesn't seem to be filtering down. Maybe God isn't providing you with intelligibility. I don't know, but let's give it a try. Let's try. Again, you're not banned. You're timed out for 10 minutes this time. You want to try for 30? That's cool too. And if you can't drop it, just tell me, and I'll just do the ban. I've got an emoji for it and everything. It's great.
It's a fantastic emoji. It's one of my favorites.
So here, maybe you only communicate in emojis. So there's the emoji for you. Okay. And look, Banhammer, no worries. There you go. There you go.
Imagine waiting out a timeout just to immediately come back with the very thing you were asked not to do. You had one job, my friend.
Look, don't mind reasonable conversation, but it's about what we're discussing, not about some other thing, Oh, and Jester is a new member. Thank you so much, Jester. That is awesome. Really appreciate it. Wait, weren't you a member before? I don't know. Maybe you were. Maybe you weren't. I'm pretty sure I had you on my list of members. Maybe YouTube just didn't tell me until now. Hey, see if you can send through your member chat and see how long it says, Jester. If you want to. Don't make me force you, but You needed your hammer. Yeah, fair enough. Fair call, my friend. Fair call.
You got to be a member to get those emojis.
Yeah, that's
but
right.
yeah, they come and go. Sometimes there's gifted memberships that wear out, and I mean, I've gone through a couple of periods where money was so tight I had to turn off my memberships, but such is life.
Like, understandable. That we understand that. It's okay. Totally understandable. It's all good. Anything that people can support me with, I appreciate. Speaking of which, I have a member stream coming up at some point. I think that's going to be, is it this Thursday? God, I'm losing track of time. Ember, help me.
You think
time is
I
becoming
can keep track of time?
That's a good point. All right. I think I'm praying to the wrong god here. I'm pleading with the wrong deity. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. Oh dear. Okay, give me 1 second. I'll just grab my calendar and make sure I'm not giving you incorrect information. Yeah. My member thing is coming up this week. That's awesome. So hopefully I'll see you there, Jester. That'll be fun. So if you want to join the fortnightly casual member hang, duck in for a readership. Ember says, do not pray to Ember unless it's for fiery spirit. Okay, I almost read that as spit for the first thing.
Oh, no.
Secondly, I know, right? Fiery spit. I'm like, wow, you go, girl. But then I read it as fiery spirit, like, a fireball shot kind of thing is what immediately I thought of.
Oh, okay.
like the vodka that you light on fire and then drink, just saying. Maybe, oh, have you ever had ouzo? That is fiery spirit. I'll tell you that right now.
I've heard the name before, but I don't think I've ever had the chance. Of course, I don't drink very much anymore. There's a lot of shit I don't do much anymore, but I'm rediscovering some of the things. For example, today when I was out with my son, I randomly sat cross-legged. I haven't been able to do that since I was a fucking child because my knees wouldn't let me, and now I can. Okay. And
oh, that's okay. Awesome. Yeah, ouzo is like a Greek. It's literally called Greek firewater. It's basically a spirit made from, I believe, aniseed. So it tastes like fiery licorice. If you lit licorice on fire and then had it, that's what it would taste like. Really, really, really bad and very, very strong. Very strong.
I mean, sometimes strength is good because efficiency.
Maybe.
The last time I legit wanted to get drunk. I asked the bartender for just straight vodka, and she was like, on the rocks, and I'm like, no, the point is to get drunk. I want it straight.
Shots, right? Okay.
It's efficient.
Yeah, I'm not like I really don't drink anymore. I think if I did shots, I think I preferred tequila. I think that would be my go-to. Lemon, salt, awesome.
I like rum. I like rum and mixed stuff, but if
that's a bit sweet for me.
I love sweet stuff. But if I'm just drinking, give me some wine. I'll get down with Dionysus. I'll drink wine all fucking night.
The original wine miracle worker. Yeah, I go for cider myself. I like cider. So apples.
Oh yeah. That's guy. So good. So good.
Dang it. Sorry, my bad. I just lost my thought. So
it happens to me too. I know.
It happens.
Sorry.
We're getting old.
It happens.
You're ahead of me though.
Matt,
yes.
Is it your position that in a world without a God, these transcendental logical properties would not always hold true without God when A doesn't equal A?
Without God, there can be no transcendental properties. So the question is not worded properly, and it shows that the listener, no offense meant, did not understand the argument. The transcendentals exist by nature. They are not dependent upon space and time for their validity. I did not say logic is logical. I said the laws of logic. That's what logic is based upon. These laws of logic are the issue.
So he thinks that instead of we observe the world around us and the laws of logic are based upon the things that we observe, and they're a model of how the universe works, he thinks that the laws are there first, and they're passed down to us through the physical world. I'm not sure I understand this argument.
All transcendentals are a facet of God that could only exist because of God. It's sort of like saying the presence of Mark's finger entails the entire mark. If you have a finger of Mark, you have the whole mark, probably. And
look, I don't want to start any murderous rampages with dismemberment, but that might not necessarily be true, right? I could prove that, you know what I mean? Like, in fact, my father proved that he cut the end of his finger off once on a bandsaw. Like, so that's not necessarily true. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's even worse than that, of course, though, because what Matt is saying is that there is the idea of a finger, and therefore it must be a real finger, and it must be Mark's finger.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. No, I see what you mean. And yeah, that's begging the question, because you're presupposing that that morality or that finger belongs to Mark instead of some other person, or it's a fake finger, or any of the other things it could be.
Yeah, it could be a carrot that Matt mistook for a finger.
Right, exactly. Or, you know, what are those white ones? Those white carrots? God, I've forgotten the name of them. Parsnip. It could be a parsnip.
Yeah.
I mean, if it was orange, it might be Trump's finger, maybe, but probably not mine.
That would be unhealthy.
Yeah. Trump, no, he's in the best health of any human on the planet. How dare you?
So I've heard.
The US doctor who was giving out pills like a corner drug dealer has told us he's in the best health of anybody ever. So yeah, it must be true. Must be true.
That's how that always works. Did you hear they named the jet from Qatar, that $400 gajillion jet or whatever it wants to be the new Air Force One? It's been christened by the internet as Panda Express because it carries orange chicken.
I don't get it.
I don't know what Chinese food is like in Australia, but in the US, orange chicken is one of the more popular dishes.
Okay, so Panda Express is a
Chinese food place.
Oh, okay. Oh, gotcha. Yeah. Do we have that in Australia? I don't think I've seen one. There's no Panda Express in Australia. Okay, that joke did not transcend America. I'm sorry. It's a non-transcendent
It's a
joke.
Culturally specific joke.
Right.
Oh
no. But I now know that you're talking about like Peking duck, or the chickens hanging in the. It's usually duck, isn't it? Hanging in the window of that stuff. Is that what you're talking about?
I don't know about animals hanging in the windows. No, orange chicken is
the dish. Yeah, gotcha. It carries orange chickens. Yeah, okay, gotcha. All right, so that becomes way less funny when you have to explain it. So
jokes are always funnier when you explain them. I'm not sure I'd agree, but
sure. You presuppose it. Okay. All right. Well, then it has to be. It's logically possible that it's funny when you explain it. So there you go. Orange chicken is not duck. Okay. Well, I'm sorry. I'm culturally insensitive. Wait, is Panda Express American culture? I don't.
It seems appropriated so it's from like China. Taco Bell, in that it's not actually legitimate ethnic food, but it's inspired by it vaguely.
Yes. Yeah, the weirdest thing is we have Nando's here. You ever had Nando's? It's like Portuguese of all things. It's wild.
Not that I'm aware of, but the name sounds familiar, so maybe.
Yeah, just some random reason Portuguese restaurants massive over here. I don't know why. It's wild.
Every country's got something. I've heard Ireland is just chock full of Indian restaurants. There's like curry everywhere, which kind of makes sense because Ireland is like, lots of sheep and whatnot. So great for lamb curry. But yeah, it's just a thing.
Oh, okay. So apparently in Washington, they've got 46 locations across 5 states in the District of Columbia.
Huh.
Yeah. So they do exist.
Look, yeah, maybe I drove past one once or something.
All right, tangents in the chat. That's you know, tangents in the chat.
How did we even get there?
I don't know. And it feels kind of hypocritical to like you know, tell somebody, hey, keep to the topic, and then we tangent off to some random thing. So yeah, but at least I'm trying to stop myself. Okay, that's the difference. Oh boy.
How is it that we can have laws of logic, which are propositions about things? Material objects and properties are not about things. Statements are about things. The law of identity, law of non-contradiction, etc., are propositions. They're truth propositions. How do they obtain their universality in an atheist?
Well, they may not be universal. Like a nominalist doesn't think that universals exist. They think that it's just common descriptions that we apply as a label in order to describe things that have similar properties. That's all. We don't think there's universals. That's all. It's just a language thing.
Word games for the win.
Yeah. Like if they're universal, then they should be the same across an entire the entire universe. But when you get down to quantum level, you can't use those laws of logic. You have to use quantum logic. It's different. So how is it universal?
Yeah, it's trippy shit. I again continuing to search for what the fuck the Trinity actually means. I had somebody try to explain it to me in terms of quantum stuff. Like if you have 3 entangled photons, they're all distinct particles, but in a certain quantum-y kind of way, they're also all the same particle.
Yep. Yeah. And that's fine. It's like Newton's law of gravity, right? It's a universal thing. But wait, Einstein came along and showed that it wasn't accurate. It's still useful. It's still a useful, you know, description of gravity because we can use it, you know, at certain levels. But it's not like, even though gravity is universal, Newton's laws of gravity are not. They're a model of it. And some models are useful, and Newton's laws are useful. But it doesn't mean that that law that we're describing is the actuality of gravity. It doesn't mean that. And even Einstein's relativity, I mean, we can't marry it with quantum physics, right? Like there's a problem there. It may be that one or the other is inaccurate, but that doesn't mean they're not useful. And that's what we're talking about. But he's taking it as this is a universal thing that has to happen everywhere, that is from the mind of God and not the properties of the thing. The properties of the universe are given by this law being established by God, which is wild, because that is begging the question. He is just making an assumption that's where it comes from without any justification whatsoever. He presupposes it. It's wild.
View, because they're declared to be true by the human, then they're not universally true. They can be declared not to be true. The atheistic worldview cannot account for the issue of transcendentals. These things, and philosophy discusses these quite a bit. How is it that an atheistic worldview without a transcendental mind can have transcendentals? You use them, you quote them, but you don't give credit where it's due.
Yeah, that's because you define transcendentals as somehow supernatural, right? We can just say, hey, maths transcends the human mind because it goes beyond the human mind and describes something in the real world. That doesn't mean we're saying it's supernatural. Like, this is just word games. This is just him using a particular definition of transcendental that only religious people use, and then saying, well, show me that this thing that I've defined in a certain way is not true. Show me that it is.
Mm-hmm. I have a principle, especially when it comes to precepts, that every single argument, every single one is either equivocation or circular. It may be a very big, complicated circle, but it's a circle every time.
Yep. Or just simply begging the question, which is a type of circular argument, but it's just saying, hey, I assume this is the case, and I'm just going to declare it so. Has not established it in any way, shape, or form.
Well, I would simply say that we do have concepts, and the word concept is a label for a model that a functioning brain is holding within itself. And as I said earlier, just because you have a word doesn't mean you have a thing. You can have things that don't have words, but you can also have words that don't have things. So
right.
A word like logic and a word like...
Oh, I love that. Yeah. I mean, I can think up something that does not exist. It does not mean it exists. It's weird. I don't know why they don't understand abstract versus concrete. Like if he's saying, oh, all these philosophers discuss this, he should at least understand. Like I debated Jim Bob, and he didn't understand the difference between a concrete and an abstraction. Like one only exists in your imagination. It's a model. It's a mental projection. It's not actually real. But you have this Neoplatonic movement that want to say, hey, in somewhere every idea is real, and that's absurd.
It's extremely absurd, but it also leads me down a weird brain tangent that actually is kind of relevant, that our minds produce transcendence and transcendentals and shit all the time. An idea occurs in your mind, and then you translate it into words and express it, and now that idea has transcended from your mind into physical reality, at least insofar as it's been described by words, and then anyone who hears that is capable of turning it back into an idea in their mind. So now the idea has transcended fucking minds. It's magic.
Right. Well, I'd like to know his definition of as transcendental. Like, I would like to know his definition of it, because if it in any way like encompasses God, supernatural, or any of this other, magical stuff, then, he's begging the question and sort of saying, hey, how do you account for this? Is like me saying, how do you account for the tusks on Blarney the magical walrus? How do you account for that?
You can't explain the walrus tusks.
You can't explain walrus tusks on my imaginary fictional walrus. Just try.
Tide goes in, tide goes out. Never a miscommunication.
Never.
You can't explain that.
Yeah. Pretty sure they can, but never mind.
Details.
Suppose I come up with a concept, anti-disestablishmentarianism. Good word. Okay? Can you all kind of think of that in your brain? You're all holding something in your mind. You all have something in your mind now when I said that word. Does that mean that thing exists in some transcendent realm? Is there an anti-disestablishmentarianism with a capital A out in the cosmos somewhere? Or is it...
Yeah, and that's where Neoplatonists would get into trouble, because you can imagine almost anything and they would have to say, well, it exists somewhere. And so, yeah, ridiculous. I don't know if you've I've said my argument from Rick and Morty, but yeah. It's ridiculous.
Simply the fact that our brains, which are used to making models, which then project to become like we think they're really things. Do you see the fallacy in the kind of reasoning that Matt's presenting? Just because we have a word doesn't mean it's actually a thing. It's a label for a function.
Did you want to wrap up there? It's actually, we're going on 3 hours. I did not notice the time. I'm having a lot of fun, but we might wrap up there and do that. Because, I mean, Matt Slick is terrible. I'm really sorry. This is
pretty bad.
Terrible. Yeah, and I don't mean just forgetting what he was going to say. Like that's not. I'd be willing to. Hey, at least he was honest and said, "Hey, I lost my train of thought." But his answers don't actually address the problems, right? They don't actually. And sort of when a question like that's presented to him, like, would a universe in which, a God doesn't exist, would it still have these transcendental things? Right? Like just any possible, or any conceivable universe where there is not a God, would it still have transcendentals? And you can just say, well, I don't know, because we're not in that universe. But he doesn't say that. He sort of says, well, the transcendentals come from God. So is that a yes or a no? Because, like, is there another way they can come up? I don't, it's so vague what his actual answer is. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, and it's, in a way, it's kind of another version of the anthropic argument. Like, there are transcendentals, therefore there must be a transcendentalator.
Yeah, but unlike the anthropic principle, where we see certain constants in the universe, or certain values or things in the universe that seem to be at a certain level or certain ratio or whatever, the transcendentals don't really have anything to show that what he's talking about when he's talking about transcendentals actually exist at all. So he's saying this thing that I've defined as things going into the supernatural needs a supernatural author to provide them. Does it? I don't know. I've never encountered these supernatural things of which you speak.
Yeah, maybe it's a variety of supernatural elements coming together to produce emergent magic effects. You don't need a magic man, just
maybe it's the Force from Star Wars.
Yeah, maybe it's the programming in the Matrix.
Yeah.
And
maybe.
We don't know. There was one programmer. There could be multiple programmers. It could have been written by an AI that was programmed by another programmer, or by another AI, who in turn was programmed by another AI, and so on and so on. Or a whole council of AIs. We just don't know.
Yeah. And that's okay. But, like, just to assume that, and I mean, that's Presup in a nutshell, isn't it? You just assume you're right and then just refuse to even accept the possibility that you're wrong. And that's the thing that gets me about people that do Presup. They think that if they if they never consider that they're wrong, then they have to be right. Like, if they just do not let the idea of being wrong enter their head, because I can say, hey, I could be wrong. There could be a God. You could be exactly right. I see no evidence to believe that, and a lot of evidence against it, right? So that's why I believe it. But I can hold in my mind, hey, but if I am wrong, this is the way things are. Okay. But it seems like Presups cannot even do that, because as soon as they start saying, hey, I could be wrong, they think, well, if I'm wrong, none of my philosophy works. So they have to go, no, I am right. How do you know? Because I have the creator telling me. And how do you know that's right? Well, because he's told me I'm right.
The voice in my head tells me I'm right.
Because I'm right. Because I'm right. I went through this with Saiten Bruggencate, Saiten Bruggencate. Basically, like, I know that I'm right. Well, how do you know? Because I know. But how do you know? Because the Bible tells me. How do you know that's right? Because I know. It's so wild hearing them talk. And when I said that is a circular argument, he said, no, it's a spiral.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I don't know how. Spiral.
That's exactly my thought. That's exactly my thought. A downward spiral into the depths of incoherence. Like, seriously, because you can do that with
the logic.
You can do that with literally anything. Like literally anything, you can do it. Yeah, sorry, Jerry. I avoid DD. He's terrible. He's an awful human being, and he's not enjoyable to talk to in any way. Last time I encountered him, I just spent the time on mute, getting like one word out and then going back on mute. It was not even worth uploading. It was so bad, because as soon as you start making any semblance of a point, he'll just mute you.
Speaking of the presupposition of correctness, that we get from DD, that we saw from Matt and from Saiten and all the others, since they're so hooked on this idea of a thing being logically possible, it therefore is true, then if they ever admit the possibility that they could be wrong, then they're accepting that they are wrong, because if it's possible, it is true.
That's a good point. And yeah, absolutely. That's a very good point, Ember. So as long as you don't accept there's a possibility that you're wrong, then it is impossible for you to be wrong. Well, that's not how epistemology and, you know, actuality works. It doesn't matter how hard you believe it. You're going to be wrong, even if you are 1,000,000% that it's impossible for you to be wrong. You know.
I tested that one. I got myself all worked up. I was as convinced as I could be that I was going to win the lottery, and I bought a ticket, and I didn't win.
Okay. You bought a ticket and you didn't win?
I did not win.
Damn it.
I know. But that's why I'm still poor.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, you could win like, you know, $100 or something. That's possible because it's split up. Like, you know, there are lower. I'm not sure how your lotteries work, mate. Maybe
yeah,
I'm wrong.
Yeah. I mean, I actually have won little bits here and there randomly. Like for a long time, I would buy like the Mega Millions ticket or whatever, and sometimes I'd win like $25 or something. But meh.
So here's how much of a nerd I am. I basically go, well, I know that statistically I will make more money putting that money aside to earn interest than like trying to win the lottery. And I will actually do better over a period of time just putting the money aside statistically. I know. Yeah. I'm a total nerd. I wear it like a badge of honor, quite frankly. Jester for $5. I advise that pre-subs are pre-subs because they are a-holes and are therefore not worth my time or effort. That is valid, Jester. I think that who was it? There was a pre-sub that said like was it who was it? Bozeman, maybe? What was the name of the guy that said that pre-sup is just to annoy atheists? Basically.
I always figured it was a modified form of trolling. It was designed to waste your time in a way they found entertaining, because
maybe,
you know, Jester's really, really close to the mark. Pre-sups are pre-sups because they're too lazy to actually come up with arguments.
Yeah, DD's Darth Dawkins, famous pre-sup. Well, I should say infamous, because no one really respects him. He's pretty much seen as a
literally no one. We all have like a clip of someone did a spoof of like a Christmas album with Darth's greatest hits, and
you know, was great.
In December we play that every so often. It's it's so good. It's so good.
It's fantastic.
So yeah, he's literally a joke of the community.
Yeah. And even like other Christians don't like him either, because he's just as rude and obnoxious to other Christians. I mean, he got thrown out of a debate once because he was just so obnoxious to everybody. They just asked him to leave, and that was between Christians, right? So it's not just sort of atheists going, no, we don't like this person. It's really he's mean to everybody. He's really horrible. Probably one of the worst out there, and that's an achievement. That's an achievement to be the worst fundamentalist out there. Well done. Slow clap for you. Yeah.
I mean, what do we mean by worst? Worst argumentation, worst values, worst. We could do an awards show.
Both. Ooh, I would like that. An awards show. What would we call it?
We could have categories, like a worst pseudoscience, for example.
Don't they already do that? Doesn't somebody do that with like don't they have like a
Well, there's the Golden Crocoduck Awards, but that's like just for creationism.
Okay, gotcha. So that's just anti-evolution people, yeah. So, you know, a philosophical one. I'm not sure what we'd call that. Maybe we can workshop it, Ems. Maybe we can workshop it. See what you think. Like have the golden circle or the golden Mott and Bailey or something. I don't know. I'm just throwing stuff out there. I'll think about it. Do you want to maybe sum that debate up? What your major takeaways were? And you know, what did you think of it?
Overall, not super impressive. Dan Barker's usually entertaining to watch, but as you said at the beginning, he didn't have much to work with. I think he refuted Matt's non-points as well as one can. Matt kind of failed to land a single point that I noticed.
Yeah.
It just it's not great, but I mean, we were amusing at least.
Oh, Jester, this is why I keep you around, mate. The mottled Bailey.
That's awesome.
That is actually really good. Okay, well, look, if you've got any ideas, if you're watching this later, drop them in the comments, drop them in the chat. More than happy to. I will take that down and put it on a list. We can choose. Maybe I should have a poll. Would that be a good idea?
People love polls.
They look. I like polls. I do like polls. I got to admit. I do have to admit. But yeah, I'll take that down. Thank you, Jester. I really appreciate it, mate. That's awesome. Yeah, I'd agree. I think that so, and this is the thing, like precepts, how you said he failed to land anything. I'm not sure if that's the idea of precepts. Like it's just a wash, right? It's just a stalemate. Right, like they say, oh, we think it comes from God, you say something else and get to a stalemate, and that's your victory condition for a precept. It's kind of very, very strange, and I agree with you. He didn't really land anything. Like he didn't land anything because a lot of his stuff was like, well, you can't explain what this is and where it comes from. And Dan Barker did. He's like, this is what a transcendent is, and this is what we mean when we say it. So he did explain what they are, and they come from the human mind, or they come from something just exceeding something else, like a plant species that transcend its native environment. That's, where's the God in that? Like, you don't need anything supernatural or a God. Just say a seed drifts on the wind and goes outside of its environment. It's transcended that environment. If you're talking about transcending reality in some way, you have to demonstrate that it transcends reality. But I don't see any reason why you can't say, well, that idea or the physical thing, it transcends reality into your mind, but it's just an abstraction. It's not real. There's nothing real about it. And that's where he was sort of pointing out the reification fallacy, which, Matt didn't address at all. Like, he really didn't push back on anything Dan had to say. Like, it was kind of like, Dan made these points and said, well, this is how we explain them. This is how things are done. This is how humans' minds work, all this stuff. And Matt just brought up another point that was based upon a presupposition. He didn't address it. And when he was like, okay, do you want to rebut that? He's just like, makes a comment that has got nothing to do with what Dan said. And he forgets what he was saying and then blames it on 5 hours of sleep. Like, I'm really sorry, but that was a terrible performance. Now, Dan did have some errors as well. I think that he did mess up on the morality from nature question, because something from something's nature can't be a product of its mind. It has to be a product of its entire properties and powers. It can't just be a mind property, right? Because I can think up and say, hey, I should do I should jump and touch the moon, right? But that's not in my nature, right?
Yeah.
But I can say that, and I can dictate it, and I can be a dictator and say, hey, everybody has to jump and touch the moon, but that's not in my nature. Right? So we have to distinguish what's being given out by an abstraction from the mind and what is a product of something's nature. And if you're going to base your morality on the Christian God's nature, wow.
Yeah, not a great nature. We can see this from another direction too, like birds building nests. It's in their nature. It's probably not in their mind. Not many birds, have the engineering knowledge to figure out how to build a nest. They can only do it because it's in their nature, not in their mind.
Right. And I mean, you see that with beavers, for instance. They will try to build dams, but it's just they they have this thing where they hear running water. Even baby beavers, they will hear running water and they try to build something over it. It isn't even something they think about, and they know that because they did the sound of running water. They just had a speaker with running water being played through it, and the beavers would try to dam it up, even though there's no water. It's in their nature to do so, and it works on sound. We know that now. Wild,
Yeah. Thanks, science.
Yeah. So Dan did slip up a bit, but overall, I mean, he absolutely slaughtered him. Just from and I mean, Matt Slick can blame it on whatever he wants, but this guy's being paid to debate. I'm amazed at what some people consider debate these days, and I don't want to sound elitist or anything, but like Andrew Wilson running a debate school is wow. Like that is wild to me, because he's one of the worst. You get him with
that's what he's selling is how to, not how to win debates, how to be so controversial that people will pay you money to come because people will come.
And I mean, he but under any moderator that is actually fair, he will get slaughtered, absolutely slaughtered, because he can't actually hold a reasonable, rational argument. So when he's forced to, he can't do it.
Yeah, it's all, and we've seen that. I mean, so I really like to watch Nominal Naomi's debates. I wish she would do more of them, and she'd take on Andrew Wilson from time to time. And when they had not even a reasonable moderator, but like anything approaching a fair moderator, Andrew just got destroyed. It was hilarious.
Yeah, because they don't rely on argumentation and debates. They rely on being a complete prick to your opponent. That's what they rely on. I dread to think. What you got coming up, Ems? Have you got anything on the docket? Oh, we're going to be back on Ember's channel next week because we flip it over. I think we can call it there. We don't need to go through all of the questions. I think that'll do, because I mean, I don't think we're going to hear anything from Matt Slick. I think Dan was doing a good job, but Matt Slick seemed to have nothing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I've got several in my stash after I stole Cam from Capturing Christianity's list. So I've got his top 10 debates. We've covered a couple. We've done a few in the past before I even got the list. We've done a few on the list. But I've also added in some others that have come up since. So yeah,
nice.
I'm not sure which one, but we do have a few that we can definitely go to. But other than that, I don't really have all that much going on. I've kind of been on slow mode on YouTube the last few weeks. I've been having increasingly bad medical issues, having to do partly with the attack that I survived back in January, partly stuff with my job trying to kill me. Apparently it's been pretty rough. So I've had to scale back my YouTube production considerably, but
that's understandable.
We will
take care of yourself.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely need the rest and such. There is a new thing on my channel. It's the thing that you mentioned earlier, the mini interviews I did at NocoCon.
Yeah,
I think they're funny. I thought people might like to see them, so that's on there for now. It isn't doing great, but it's not my normal content either. But maybe it'll go back to being a members only feature, but that's one plus of being a member is there's that whole shit ton of exclusive content. I probably will make stuff in the future, but I don't know. I just don't know what the future holds at this point. But for the time being, I intend to continue doing the debate reviews because they're fun and because the last time I tried to quit, Mark asked me not to.
I did. I would be sad. I would be sad, but that's okay. You do what's best for you. You do what's best for you. I can only tell you how I would feel about it. And I think a lot of people would be sad if you quit. But if it's not good for your well-being, what's good for your well-being is really the right thing to do, and that's how I approach morality, as you know. So I think I would totally understand and be sad. It's okay. You can be both. You can do both.
Yeah, it's true. But I mean, I'm gonna do something at some point as long as I don't actually die. I mean, I will make more good news for transpositions. It's just not weekly anymore. It's as I can, and I haven't had the can part in a little bit, but you know.
Well, if you can support Ember through this tough time, I've put the link in the chat to Em's channel. If you can, please do help out as much as possible. And look, it's crazy for everybody at the moment, and I know that, you know, and I just, you know, I totally understand if you know it gets too much, because it's, you know, insane at the moment, and I can't even imagine what you're going through. But if you can support, send some love over M's way, and help out to the people that are struggling, if you can, you know. But don't drown yourself trying to save somebody else. That's not what we want you to do. We want you to take care of all your well-being out there, and that's how we build a healthy society. We can't destroy ourselves helping others. At the same time, if you can, it's good for your well-being. You do feel good about yourself when you can help others. That's a very human thing. Doesn't need a god. It just is. We're a social species. Yeah,
that's true. As you know, people have been around a while know, I've done a bunch of fundraisers for some of our friends in the community when they've been in trouble, and you know, you feel good. You've done something to help.
Yep. I do have the member stream this week on my Wednesday or Tuesday night. I do have another aimbot going live, which is always fun. It was a little wild last week. It was awesome. The last one was hilarious. That was good fun. So do make that if you can. I do also, I have the member stream. That's Wednesday night Eastern time or Thursday morning my time. And then I've got Fundamentalist Fails. And then we'll be back on Ember's channel. I've already linked it. The part 1 and 2 for this, if you do want to watch them, are on Ember's channel. We will have a fresh new debate with hopefully someone's got it. Should I be watching these in their fullest? Because I sort of saw the first one, a part of this one, and went, yeah, it's fine. You know, like he's talking about stuff. That's and I didn't realize just how bad Matt Slick. Well, I don't think that was Dan Barker at all. He had a lot of, you know, salient points and things he was bringing up. Matt Slick just sort of said, well, you can't touch the moon.
I mean, with a spaceship, you could, but yeah.
I feel like doing a Dr. Tapioca and going, well, not with that attitude, you can't.
Right. Oh, I love that phrase. I wish I remembered to use it more often.
Yeah, I know. But he seemed to be saying, hey, if you can't reach the moon, just have faith, you know. I don't know.
With Jesus, all things are transcendable.
Apparently so. Apparently you can transcend your lack of belief, which is wild. Anyway, so that'll about do it. And thank you so much for joining us. It's been a fun show. I hope you had a good time. Take care of yourself. Don't forget to be kind to yourself. That includes you, little Ember. Be kind to yourself.
I am trying.
It's hard to do. I don't know. I know you do. Most people out there, they hold themselves at a higher account than other people. So, you know, maybe be kinder to yourself like you would. Imagine if another person was telling you that and how you would treat them, and be kind to yourself like that. Be kind to each other. So when somebody does say that they're struggling, definitely be kind to them. They don't need extra burdens. They don't need that. And it's pointless. What's the point? But do take care, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, everybody.